Hello and welcome to the Bond Revisited podcast with me, Tom.
And me, Joe.
The podcast where we rewatch the Bond films one by one, discuss them, and then rank them alongside the other Bond films to build our own definitive list for the Bond franchise. You are listening to another bonus episode where we'll be revisiting Casino Royale. So it's really nice to be back, Joe. Really nice to be doing this again. It feels really weird to be doing it for this reason, to cover this film.
Yeah, I'm happy to be back. It's nice to talk to you again, Tom. But I don't really like the situation we are in.
No, you would think it would be like, oh, we're back chatting some Bond, and we can be like, oh, remember that film, wasn't that great? Oh, Bond, what a great franchise. So many iconic films and moments. Oh, we're just two Bond fans having a good old time. But instead, we've got to tackle something that is very much not a celebration of Bond, I suppose is the nice way of saying it.
No, it's a film that I tried to watch a number of years ago. Tried being a very important word there. And to be fair, I made it through, but I don't really know what I'd watched. And I think since that time, that was probably about over 5 years ago now. Since that time, I have tried to kind of like stifle that in the back of my mind. Pretend it's not there. Because, the small amount of memories I have of this film is that it was just a complete disaster. So having rewatched it, I gotta say, some things not as bad as I remember. Other things worse than I remember.
Oh dear. I've never seen this film. That's what I'm coming to this. But I guess a little bit of context for people, because this is like one of the lesser known... Well, this is the least known Bond film, right? There's nothing lesser known than this in terms of an actual James Bond film. You've got the main 25, you've got Never Say Never Again, which has Sean Connery, and then you have this film. And we probably won't be able to get into all of the production stuff with this film. There's like a lot that you could really say. From what I was reading, it seemed pretty complicated how this film even got made. So I'll try and just sum it up that somebody early on, before the Bond films were made, bought the rights to Casino Royale, the first Bond book, and before everything kind of kicked off as with it being a big film franchise, it kind of the rights got split a bit. So as Bond was doing really well with Dr. No and From Russia with Love and Goldfinger, somebody was like, well, I have the rights to Casino Royale. So they just made their own Casino Royale film, but it was like a weird comedy, and it just, I guess, kind of came and went. I don't think it had any effect on the rest of the Bond franchise, and it's just this very strange comedic fever dream version of Casino Royale that then had big knock-on effects with the rights, and then that got all very complicated until it all got reset again back in 2006 when we got a proper version of the film. So that's kind of why I hadn't seen it, because it's like nobody talks about this one. Some people do, of course, but it's just, it exists, and I think that's where it really sits in terms of the Bond franchise and Bond fandom as a whole.
Yeah, it's a unique little piece of Bond history in terms of the puzzle. I think it had a very long and arduous production in terms of, I think, mainly the amount of writers that were hired to work on the script. I think at one point it was actually meant to be a bit more serious, and then they realised, well, we can't compete with the actual Bond films, they're doing really well, so let's try something different. And that's how it ended up being this more of a spoof satire. And I think you can definitely see where there's remnants of it maybe not being a spoof, and then also these really weird slapstick bits that are thrown in to try and get it there. I mean, we'll talk about it all, unfortunately, but it's really quite peculiar.
Yeah, it just feels like with this one, like broadly speaking, like there's just so many. Because I was trying to figure out why this doesn't get discussed that much. Like, of course, when you're covering Bond, a lot of people will cover it. Some people don't. You would think the original adaptation of Casino Royale would have a little bit more weight and a little bit more discussion behind it. And I was trying to think about why that isn't the case. The obvious answer is because it's bad. That's an easy one. But at the same time, I think a lot of it is just because the Bond franchise has so many different layers to it. There's so many different things to like dive into and discuss and understand before you would ever talk about this film. like you have the main franchise, but even within the main franchise of films, you have like different eras. And some people would say, "Oh, I like James Bond," but they might not even know about the George Lazenby stuff. Like that's a whole other thing that's going on. And then you've got the books themselves and all the other media. There's like so much to the Bond franchise that you have to dig through so many layers just to find this thing. And even when you find it, you just have this just like kind of weird, strange comedy that just came and went. So that's, I guess, it's also bad, which is probably why people don't talk about it. But I just think because of the Bond franchise as a whole has so much going on, you just never really would want to focus on this because why would you?
So what you're basically saying, Tom, is that we're scraping the bottom of the barrel.
We are.
Here.
We've got nothing.
We're done.
We got to cover all of it. It's a bonus episode, so it's fine.
Oh, well, look forward to this, folks. You heard it here, where this is the bottom of the barrel and we're getting what we can.
All kind of jokes aside, like, it is nice to tick it off. Like, the reason why
Yeah.
we're doing this is because I pushed you to do it, I feel. I wanted to watch it. I had never seen it before. I wanted to say I'd seen them all. I don't know how worthwhile that kind of really was after watching it, but before watching it, I was very kind of keen and excited to finally check this out and just kind of at least know what it was.
Yeah. I got to admit, even in all of my comments I said earlier, I was interested to go back to it after all these years. So I'm glad we're doing it.
Yes. Because, like, do you even remember when you found out about this film? Like, did you kind of always know about this film? Like, I guess
No.
maybe probably not when you were like 8, but like, do you kind of remember
I
when
was
you kind
there.
of, realized this was like a thing?
No, not at all. It probably wouldn't have been until quite late in terms of being a Bond fan and kind of actually having enough of a interest to go out and try and find a bit more background to all the production and stuff. Because when you're young, you just care about the stunts and the action, and then actually there is a lot more to it. So probably not until, well, I don't want to say fairly recently, but because I'm quite old, but probably later than you'd think.
Yeah, I'm the same. Like, part of the reason why I hadn't seen it is because I just didn't know. And I think even if somebody had like told me, or maybe somebody like told me, or I read it and then just forgot. just maybe at some point I knew and then just forgot. I never got around to it. But yeah, again, just at some point I found out, but it's just not discussed to that. It's just so discussed so little that I never had that urge to actually go and check out and figure it out. And I can't really remember when I did find out about it. It might have only been just before we started doing the podcast, maybe, but
Yeah. Well, that's
yeah.
the thing, isn't it? When someone might talk about non-official Bond films, you just go straight to Never Say Never Again. That's the big one. It's got Sean Connery. It was Battle of the Bonds.
Yeah.
This one, it's like a little footnote. No one cares about this one, so I get it.
Yeah. All right, so let's get into it. I think for this episode, we're probably going to go through this one a little bit quicker. We obviously normally go through it in quite quite detailed. We go through scene by scene, really try and discuss each one and try and explain the plot. There isn't much plot in this one, or you could argue there's too much plot, or
Yes.
I don't know. There's a plot, but really, really understanding that and each scene, it just doesn't matter that much. So we're probably going to go more high level with some of this stuff, just so we can discuss the film. But if we try to go into the same level detail, like we did with Never Say Never Again as an example, if we spend 5 hours talking about this film, that's fun for no one. So we probably will cover it a bit more speedily than the other ones.
Well, we'll see. I imagine I'll end up getting bogged down in some madness. If I do, stop me, for goodness sake, please.
Okay, that seems like a good deal. So we start off, and there is a pre-title sequence, although I think that's very generous to call it that. Very brief scene where Bond meets up with Mathis. None of this is really explained. If you know Casino Royale, you obviously know Mathis from that film and that book. And Bond they're in Paris, I believe, and Bond just says, "Can I see your credentials?" And I think it's like you can't see below the waist down on Mathis, and he's like holding his credentials down towards his crotch, I think. And then Bond's like, "That all seems to be in order," and then they leave. So, and that's it. That's the whole scene. So I guess the joke is, haha, he didn't mean those credentials. I think, is that what the joke was?
Yeah, starting off really highbrow from the get-go.
It's like
Yeah.
that made me quite sad, that joke. Because I'm like, is that the top comedy we have here for your comedy film? Is that like you want to start off strong, don't you? You want to start off with a funny joke. And if you're gonna have a scene that is only about one joke to get you started, you better hope it's a good one. And it's such a nothing joke. And I was like, oh no. Oh no, oh no.
Yeah, it's over so quickly. I will be interested to hear as we go through this film how many times you actually legitimately laughed, like what you actually found funny. Because yeah, well, it surprised me
Okay, yeah,
myself.
it's not zero from my
It's not
side.
zero.
It's
Yeah,
definitely not zero. I did
yeah.
laugh a couple of times at least.
I wonder if it will be similar things. We'll see.
So yeah, that goes into our credits, and yes, they do like a credit sequence. Of course, they don't really try to copy the Bond one at all. And I think nowadays, when you see credit sequence or think about that, you think about it as being a Bond thing because it's so tied to that franchise. But I don't even think they were trying to mimic it, right? I think it was more just like,
No.
yeah, films in the 60s did a title sequence or did a credit sequence. So this was just kind of theirs. It's not trying to be like a Bond one in the slightest.
Yeah, it sort of has that. I'm trying to think of the guy's name. Is it Soul Bass maybe or something like that? It was quite a prominent graphic title film man in the
Sure.
60s. He did things for like It's a Mad, 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 Mad World, which was actually quite a similar film to this in many ways. Sort of has that animated movement stuff going on, but yeah, no Bond stuff, no silhouettes of women or like colors really. It's quite repetitive really.
Yes, it's just a letter, like somebody's name is on screen. The letter is very highly detailed and drawn, and then those letters like open out, and then it shows a little footage of that person. And as you're going through it, you're going to see a lot of people you know. I wouldn't say I know everyone in this film. I'm not a big kind of. I just don't know that. I just don't have that knowledge in terms of like famous actors from the 60s and stuff, and some of these more older actors. But you've got people like Peter Sellers is in this film, and Orson Welles and Woody Allen is in this film. And there's just like a lot of people. It's like, oh, okay, right,
Yeah.
they're in this, right?
Yeah. It's one of those things where I think you're at an immediate disadvantage watching this film if you are not over the age of 70 because
I'm
I
only
feel like
68, so that's about. I'm so close.
I mean, there's there's those big names like you just said, but I think there's also a lot of other famous people, but they've just been lost to time.
Yeah,
Like they were big on TV in the 60s, maybe. It's kind of like the equivalent of. That's why I say it's similar to It's a Mad, 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 Mad World. I can't remember how many Mads there are, where there was tons of famous people in that. But if you watch it today, you'll probably recognize a handful. Or maybe a slightly more modern take, and it would be. Do you remember the film Rat Race?
yes,
In the early 2000s. Imagine that in like 30 years' time. How many people are going to know some of the celebrities in that? I don't know. So yeah, I think we're just for a lot of the scenes in this film. I'm like, oh, maybe that meant a bit more to people back in the 60s, but to me, I'm getting nothing.
Well, yeah, it was kind of interesting to find out that this version of Casino Royale, that's what this is a comedy ensemble film. It's taking some of the big actors and famous people of the time and mashing them all together, which is something that does happen. As you say, I think Rat Race is a really good example. Just sometimes people make a comedy and they put a ton of people in it. I don't think there's really been many successful ones recently. There was like This Is the End, and there was that
Yep.
really awful one, movie 4213, something like that. That
Oh
everyone
yes, yeah,
hated.
yeah,
It is just something that happens every now and then. So yeah, this is that version. And as you kind of say, it would be nice to appreciate all of this and appreciate what went into making this happen and having all these comedy and acting legends. But yeah, it doesn't mean too much to me. And I believe yourself as well.
yeah.
So yeah, so the credits finish up and we go on this scene of these 4 cars in the countryside. They all kind of park up and then get into a different car where someone else drives them along. And there's just these 4 people of different nationalities. And we have a Scottish fella and I believe a Russian and I want to say an American from the CIA. And the Scottish guy is just kind of like rambling on very strangely about a person, which is actually describing James Bond. I really had no idea what this guy was saying during this scene. I just could not pay attention to it.
That's fair.
And then they drive forward and they're talking about going to meet James Bond. And there's just a load of lions. Like they just drive down like in all these trees, and they kind of driving onto Bond's estate, and there's just a ton of lions, and a lion gets on top of the car, and they kind of keep driving, and I think they're all like, "Oh, I don't want to be eaten by lions. Oh, goodness me!" And that, yeah.
Let's analyze this.
Oh, finally, yeah.
Let's analyze this. Why? Like, what's this about? Why lions?
I think funny? It's just weird, isn't it? Like, right?
It's just weird.
It's just something this film does a ton, and this isn't even the weirdest part or the weirdest like example of this. This film just throws out like some of its comedy is just like, here's something that's a bit odd you wouldn't expect. And you're like, you're right, I did not expect that. Well done. You have bested me this day, but it does make you laugh.
Well, this film had too much money, clearly. If it could just afford to be like, lions would be weird, wouldn't it? All right, yeah, let's get some lions. And as you say, there's lots of other points where it's like, just the shock factor feels like was what they were going for rather than it meaning anything. So yeah, there's some lions.
It's a lot of lions as well. Like 20 lions, like, but actual lions. This is the 60s. They didn't fake it. They actually got like 20 lions on this. And it's weird to see them on like grass in what I'm assuming is England. It was, very strange. So eventually the car arrives at this mansion, this big manor, and we see James Bond, who is played by, do you remember his name?
His name is David Niven.
Yes.
Yeah.
Another one of those persons where like I did recognize him. I did straight away be like, oh, that guy, sure. But in terms of actually like knowing his work, not so much from my side.
Yeah, I think he might have played. No, that's Peter Cushing. Oh my, they all blend together, all these old men from the 60s. Never mind. I won't even try.
Yeah, so he's playing Bond, and he's playing like a retired Bond. And this whole kind of scene is basically about Bond being retired and being a little bit just a bit strange, I suppose. Like he plays piano, he does some odd exercises on this chair, and these four, like, I don't know what that I don't know what that was exercising.
I want that chair though. It looked quite fun. I'm going to be honest.
Just bounced him up and down, I guess. Yeah. Core strength, I suppose.
Yeah, it's getting those abs.
Yeah, so he seems to be doing quite well, just maybe a little bit mad here. Although he still seems very sharp because he ends up talking to these four gentlemen, and the short of it is that the Scottish guy is actually M, apparently. And then these other people are just like famous generals or commanders that Bond knows, and they're just like, you need to come back. There's a big problem. Like all the agents are being killed, and you need to come out of retirement. And James says no, and then he goes to play on his piano. And then there's like this weird thing, like it tries to get a little serious, I think, where he's like, why did Bond retire? And it's like, because someone that he loved, he had to escort her somewhere just to be killed. And then that's that, I guess.
Yeah.
And then M tries to be like, are you sure? Here's a letter from the Queen. He still refuses. So M then lights a cigar, which triggers British troops nearby to fire a load of like mortars, and then it just blows up his mansion, and M's toupee goes flying.
Okay, that was the first laugh for me, was the toupee. I'm a sucker for a hairpiece going flying, what can I say? That might have even happened with Sean Connery in one of the bloopers. Who's to say? This whole first part of the film, it's actually... I was surprisingly interested in where they were going with this, because the idea of it, of these... I mean, the idea of like the four different CIA, the French one, the MI6 and KGBs coming together, that's obviously very silly. But the idea of a retired Bond who is actually completely different to the Bond that we know, and is actually upset at the idea of them carrying on the Bond code name, with those Bonds then being like the chauvinistic, seducing types, and he's a bit of a prude and he doesn't like it. I actually thought, oh, that's an interesting idea. Like, in terms of a satire, that's a good premise to go on. I thought I was pleasantly surprised.
Yeah, I thought this was actually okay. A little bit slow. I wasn't super into it, but yeah, as a setup for the film, an older Bond, like, yeah, that older Bond coming out of retirement, yeah, that kind of fits. That kind of makes sense to me. Again, I think it was still probably a little bit too weird for me to get into it. And I guess the main thing I wasn't super into is the way Bond was being portrayed here. I this is picky, but I don't like the mustache. He's got a little
Oh,
mustache. I'm like,
oh,
Bond doesn't have a little mustache. That he gave me more like of a detective vibe, a Poirot.
yeah.
Well, quite a
I,
Poirot,
I,
but
I can see that definitely.
and that felt like didn't quite fit. But I think at this point in the film is when I was trying to get around in my head, being like, right, is this actually going to be a Bond film? Is this actually going to be a comedy, or is this kind of going to be both? And I think at this point in the film, I wasn't 100% sure. It was clearly like a Bond film with comedy, but it did feel like the setup was actually a little bit more of an actual kind of Bond film than I expected. That doesn't last long, and it
No.
clearly does want to be a comedy. But I was like, this is okay. Okay, all right. Let's see where we're going here. Not loving the way Bond is being portrayed. The jokes aren't really landing, but I'm okay with this setup. It makes sense.
Yeah, the idea, because he also has a stutter as well, doesn't he? It's
Yeah,
like a very different Bond. He's a prude. He has a stutter. He's an old man now, as you say. He's retired. He left after that woman he fell in love with was shot or something, which they very briefly touch on and try and make it sound sad. Um, so yeah, I actually thought kind of like with you, like oh, this could go somewhere. Obviously, I know what's coming, but I was trying to suspend my disbelief and just keep going with it.
yes.
So after M's hairpiece has gone flying and Bond's basically been forced to help them out because his home has been destroyed, there's a brief cut to a lair, and I can't remember if they even say there's like a voiceover that says about start plan B or something. Smersh. I think they do say Smersh. So that's
Yeah,
the
I think they
baddie.
do say Smersh. Yeah.
We see Smersh. We see a silhouette of the leader on a big chair at the end. And the idea is to destroy Bond's moral image, which is a very, very interesting evil plan to start off the film. Because we've seen that Bond doesn't agree with what the later code names of Bond has taken up. So they want to destroy the real Bond's moral image. Something along that line, anyway.
Yeah, I did
But
not pick up on a lot of those details. Like some of this stuff moves so quickly with the cuts
yeah,
and the edits. Like I missed a lot of details there. So when this was explained, it was explained, but I was super confused going into the next scene because I missed a lot of these details that you just went over because it's just so quick.
it's so quick. It's literally one scene in that lair place, and then it moves back to Bond, who's now heading into Scotland. He gets spied on, and the woman who spotted him starts talking to a bagpiper and kind of like setting up what we're about to see. With there's just names thrown around like Agent Mimi impersonating Fiona, and it's like I don't know what's going on. You just kind of have to listen to this and hope for the best as the scene plays out, because Bond then goes into this big Scottish castle, and he's there to meet M's widow, apparently, because M died.
I don't know how.
M died. He just has this box, and it's like this is all that remains of M. And he opens up the box, and of course, it is just the toupee. So
Yeah. It's funny talking about it, but it didn't really make me laugh at the time because it's so confusing. Like, how did he die? Like, how?
I don't know. I don't know. But then she calls it the heirloom, which I thought was quite good. That was
Well,
like laugh number 2 for me. Listen, I have a low bar.
It was so set up. It was so forced in. I was kind of like, okay, play the ba 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 ba.
Yeah.
Like it was
Yep.
very much that type of joke.
It really was. So yeah, Bond's there to talk to his widow, who we're kind of told is not actually his widow, but a spy. But whatever. And she's got this really thick, cliche Scottish accent going on, and she starts spouting off all of these traditions and things to do with the what was M's name? Was it Macari?
Yeah, something like that.
Something like that. It's like, oh, in the Macari family, we do this, and after someone's death, we do that, and just spouts off all this nonsense basically for a minute or two. There's a goat in the background that's about to be slaughtered, and it's a real goat that's like tied up. It's quite sad.
Yeah, screaming.
So yeah, that's our little introduction to Fiona and the Macari family, and Bond is I think he then goes to his room, and you very quickly realise that this whole place is just full of women. There's 2 women in his room who very helpfully introduce themselves as Heather and Meg, more names. and they start to just undress him, because I think he's getting ready for a bath, and he's obviously very uncomfortable, and there's lots of innuendos, and I mean, I don't know if we've talked about the music yet, but it's just it's probably playing by this point, but let's just say that the soundtrack for this film is quite limited, and it does seem like there's only a few different themes that play, and they're all very similar. And it's like a sort of, well, I don't even know, how would you describe it?
Oh, it's like it's clearly meant to be more comedy focused, isn't it? Really, like it's not trying to be
Yeah,
serious. It's just like kind of fun, bouncy horns, I guess. Like ba 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 ba. Like
yeah,
it's like that sort of thing. Maybe not even that high energy. I probably pumped that up a little bit more than I needed to. It's very like low energy, like horns, I suppose.
yeah. And actually, one thing I forgot to point out when we were talking about the title sequence is the theme music. So I don't know if the rest of the music, because it all sounds similar, was done by Herb Alpert. And I was like, hang on, I recognize that name. And I looked it up afterwards. It's the Spanish Flea guy. That's why it all sounds like the
Oh,
Spanish Flea. There was a
yeah, it
little
does.
Spanish Flea. Yeah. So there you go. Maybe he did all the music. So you're gonna hear that a lot. So get used to it. So yeah, Bond goes for a bath. Of course, there's a woman in the bath. There's women all coming out of the doorways as he heads to the bathroom. They're all trying to seduce him as part of this Smersh plan to destroy his moralness. And he gets in the bath with a 17-year-old. I don't
Yeah,
know.
they gotta specify.
Yep, yep. And, scrubbing his back and making him turn around. And they've all got silly Scottish accents and just more Scottish nonsense being said. There's actually there's no meaning behind anything in these scenes, to be honest with you. It's just happening. And as that's happening, the two women swap a button on Bond's jacket for some sort of tech. We don't know what it is, but they just do a little switcheroo whilst he doesn't see.
There's basically two jokes for this whole section. And by the way, this whole section in Scotland, completely pointless. Like, you could cut
Yeah,
all of this and literally nothing would change about the film. It would be totally fine. Like, if Bond just went straight to London, you would miss nothing.
yeah.
But there's two jokes here. One, haha, Scottish people, aren't they stupid? With their silly haggis and accents and traditions. Ha 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 ha. Which I thought, like, is that meant to be a dig at, like, because of the Sean Connery with the Scottish stuff?
Oh,
Do they go
quite
so
possibly.
hard against Scottish people and taking the mick out of them because, of Sean Connery? I don't know if they're quite that, I don't know, vindictive against the other franchise. It feels like they didn't quite have that relation, like, that rivalry that, say, the Never Say Never Again did, so probably
Yeah,
not. But even then, it was very strange because none of these jokes are funny. They're only funny if you hate Scottish people and think they're funny to laugh at like
pretty
this.
much. Yeah,
And then the other joke is, haha, Bond around pretty women, because the whole idea is that Smersh, these are all just Smersh agents, I believe. So because it's Bond, they use pretty women, and then it's just Bond with pretty women being kind of awkward because they're like, again, as you said, they just keep saying their age, like, I'm 16, I'm 19, when Bond's supposed to be old, and then it's just kind of uncomfortable. But just none of it's funny. Like, none of this made me laugh because neither of those jokes are very funny. So this is just long, awkward scenes of just jokes that aren't landing. And this is when I kind of knew I'm probably not going to like this film. This
yeah.
probably isn't for me.
It needed more hair jokes.
There we go.
Just give me more hair jokes, and I'll be happy. So yeah, after the bath, Bond heads down, and it's dinner time. It's part of the Scottish. You have whiskey and haggis, and they're all drinking, and then there's loads of people dancing and bagpipers, and Fiona's there, and they drink whiskey, but I don't know. Bond looks like he's drinking it, but maybe he's not because everyone else passes out and he doesn't, and that's the end of the scene, basically.
Yeah, I don't know why that happened. Like,
I
I'm
don't
sure there's
know.
a reason, but I guess it's meant to be that they're drunk, but they all just pass out like they've been poisoned or
I thought they were poisoned.
something like
Yeah,
that.
maybe he's just got he's Bond. He's got the hardy stomach. He can handle it. But yeah, so everyone else passes out, and Bond heads to bed. But then Fiona's back again, and she comes in, and she's looking all sexy in her like bedroom dress, and she wants to she wants to be doodled. She says.
Yeah.
She's trying to seduce Bond, and yeah, she wants to be doodled. James Bond refuses. He's having none of that. He'd rather have the punishment, he says, and so the punishment is to pay the piper. And then, oh god, I forgot about this bit. I'm just reading my notes. Yeah, Fiona's unhappy with that, so she calls in this bugle. She calls these big Scottish men in their kilts, and they come over, and they all head downstairs. And I thought it was going to be a big fight scene, but actually they need to do the vassal,
Yeah, like a
I don't know
wassail or
wassail,
wassail, something
which
like
is
that.
just throwing this big heavy ball like World's Strongest Man competition type thing. And so you see them all these big men trying to pick up this stone ball, and all of them fail in funny ways and slapstick ways. They fall over or their bones crack. Apart from James, obviously. James does it because he's amazing. And she finds it very... I think that's when it's meant to be that actually her agent Smersh cover is destroyed because she falls for him, truly. And there's all these the agents still behind her that are like, oh no, we've lost her. Tell authority. Phone to authority. But yeah, this whole scene with the other men and this ball, it just went on for so long. And it's just the same joke every time, like, oh, yeah, they didn't do it. And not in interesting ways either. It's just they fall backwards, or yeah, they fall forwards. It's just so get on with it.
Yeah, like it just didn't need to be repeated so many times. There's not that much you can really do with man picks up heavy ball, but it goes wrong. And it's not even that good of a joke. It's not even that funny. It's like Looney Tunes does it better. Like like that is a lot funnier than this kind of stuff. So yeah, it's just more bad comedy for something that doesn't need to exist in the film at all.
Yeah. I will say though, I know you might not agree with this because you've said that you're not quite on board with this. Although maybe by this point you've sort of let loose of that idea of what Bond should be. But like this version of Bond, I don't mind it, but I do like the actor. I do like David Niven. I think he is somehow he's keeping the film together in a way, because I think he's actually the one that's like serious enough to not let it just fall apart into a complete mess. And I think because maybe this is more of an external factor about like I know of him and like the sort of actor he was, where he's actually I think he was quite a serious actor in lots of other things. For me, that's like, oh, okay, he's keeping me in with his sort of the stature of it. I don't know.
I mean, I could see that. Like, yeah, I think he probably plays it correctly because he is more of the straight man, right? Like not
Yeah,
super
yeah,
straight, but he is trying to kind of do that role, and that probably was the most sensible thing to do. I think for me, I just find this all so unfunny and annoying and boring and just awful that there's like only so much he can do. Like if it was
yeah,
a funnier scene or if it was like a better film, then I think it could fit pretty well. I think he could pull it off. It's just I think he's trying his best in something that is just like, God, just get him some good material, guys. Like, come on, like get him something funnier than just haha Scottish people. Like there needed to be better jokes here. So I could definitely see him. Like, and I definitely didn't dislike him in the film. I just think these scenes, especially in Scotland, are so kind of boring and unfunny. I just kind of can't see him too positively because of that.
yeah. They are tough. They're tough. So, as part of the Scottish traditions that the wife, or so the widow, was talking about, one of them is about having a grouse hunt. And so it's the next day, and we see this VW camper van full of women driving into the fields. It also has some sort of big metallic thing on top of it, but don't worry about that for now. Um, and they start to beat the grass for the grouse to fly out, and Bond's there with his gun to shoot them. We see Mimi. Mimi was Fiona, by the way, but now that she's fallen for Bond and betrayed Smersh, she's been locked away. She hears Bond shooting and climbs out, and she climbs on the pipe, and the pipe comes loose, and she starts to swing on it, and she falls down and makes her way down to the bottom. And then we cut back to Bond, who we see that the van, the big metallic van thing, has ducks being launched from it, and they're like robo ducks, like drones basically, and they're honing in on Bond because of the button that they switched earlier. So they're now trying to kill Bond. That whole plan about the moral stuff, that's gone. I think they're just trying to kill him, and they start to hone in. But he's such a good shot. He's always shooting them down, and they explode before they get to him. Mimi runs over and tells him what's happened. They're trying to kill him now because of the button. She cuts off his button, and then they use, is it her bra or something like that?
Yeah, I think it's his braces.
Oh, his braces, that's right. I think it might be the other. Yeah, so they start to catapult this button back over to the women at the camper van. And so the duck starts to homing on them, and oh no, and it just goes back and forth for a bit. Then they start flinging it back. And as they're doing this, Mimi tells Bond what's happening and talks about the International Mother's Help in East Berlin, which is Smersh's cover house, and that's where to go next. Eventually, Bond flings the button into the camper van machine. It blows up. They all die. Apparently, Mimi looks like she got wounded by the explosion, so she's like, "Oh, Bond, I'm dying. Kiss me." So they have a little smooch, and actually, she's not dying. She's not dying. Bond's like, "Are you really dying?" No. I'm going to go join a nunnery now, though, or the convent, and off she goes. I did quite like that. I'm like, "Are you really dying?" No.
Yeah, I thought that was all right. Like, as you kind of describe it, it's like I remember being miserable watching this, but I feel like talking about it now, it's like a good idea for like a Bond parody, right? Like there is something about the Bond films when Bond goes to be and like, does the hunting thing and how silly that stuff is, like in Moonraker and things. Like there is like a silliness to that feels like a really good idea in terms of like parodying Bond. I just don't think it works. I just didn't find it funny enough. But it's like, now that we talk about it, now that you describe it, it's like, I can kind of see it. I can kind of see what they were going for. It's just the jokes. Yeah, like the jokes just don't land really. And I think the plot gets so confusing and weird that you kind of get distracted trying to even know what's going on with everything because it's surprisingly complicated. Like, as you were saying, like Fiona, who is like M's widow, but that's actually Mimi, and these are all Smersh. Must now she's betrayed those, and now Bond gets told other info about where to go. It's like just too confusing for this type of film, and it just kind of distracts from what actually is probably pretty solid idea. Just let's have a silly like Bond shooting exploding robo ducks. Like that's kind of funny.
Yeah, you're right. This sort of plot depth, detail, you let that slide for an actual Bond film because it's an actual Bond film, and there's going to be beats to go along with it, and you might not get all the information at once, but you're going to get it, and it's fine. You just strap in. When you're in this film, and you're like, well, I can tell it's not going to be serious now, so hopefully it's funny. I don't want to have to pay attention to this. It's too much effort. So yeah, I totally agree.
Yeah, like by this point, by the time you've done the Scotland stuff, it's kind of clear that when I asked before about how much of a Bond film this is going to be, like no, not really. Like I guess the beats are kind of there, but it's so focused on the comedy and the silliness, and there's such weird pacing to it. You kind of already have to put that aside. Like you have to put that aside to get anything out of it. And even then, it's debatable how much you would get out of this. Like there's still jokes later in the film, and I think coming up in the next scene, which relies on your knowledge of Bond to really find funny. So they still do attempt that stuff. But again, in terms of taking any of this as any sort of like proper Bond film, it's like, nah. That's just already by this point, it's clear that's not the case.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, so Bond then leaves. He leaves that estate, that Scotland done. And then we get quite a short, well, I guess a semi-short one where Bond is now traveling down to London, but the pretty women working for Smersh is like, we got to get him. And then there's this really weird car chase where he's being chased by somebody, but then there's like a remote control milk truck that's also chasing them. And it just kind of ends with, I think, Bond gets away and the milk truck drives into the other car that was chasing them, and then it blows up, and that's kind of it. I think they kind of try to do some sort of a chase scene. Like it's clearly the whole, was it rear projection? Is that what it's called?
Yeah.
Like it's clearly that sort of effect, but they are kind of trying to do some sort of chase scene. It's just, again, it's more padding ultimately. Didn't really find it that funny. And you could have cut it. I would have been happy to cut it.
Yep. Yeah. The main thing I liked from this whole, I mean, it's an action scene, I suppose. I mean, there's explosions in it. It's not particularly good, but the main thing I liked wasn't even seeing the cars and stuff on the road, like the real cars. I like the little Scalextric model that they have in the Smersh operation
Yeah.
room. That's meant to be, what's actually happening in real life. I just thought that's kind of dumb.
Yeah. There is kind of like, because some of this, it's hard not to think about Austin Powers, right? At some point, we're going to have to mention it. I'm not going to say
Yes.
Austin Powers probably, I don't know how much Austin Powers actually lifted from this film, but some of the same jokes that Austin Powers did, this film also kind of does. So it's like a recurring thing that Smersh is all about just pretty young women trying to get Bond. And you kind of see that a lot here, where you have this kind of exaggerated, quite silly control room just filled with beautiful women trying to get Bond. It just doesn't feel like it works as well here. It just feels a bit, I don't know, like I don't think it's that good of a joke, I guess. And in Austin Powers, it's one part of it, but it's not a
Yeah.
heavy focus. And it feels like actually making that a heavy focus, especially with how old Bond is meant to be, it kind of makes me realize, like, yeah, it's probably good that Austin Powers maybe didn't focus on that too much. It's actually not that funny.
No, I think it would have been difficult to in more modern times as well. Like, there's just so many young women in this film, just a ridiculous amount of women. This film is incredibly horny. Like, it's
Yeah.
just like uncomfortably so. Like, every other scene has just got this woman with her legs out or cleavage, and it's just I don't know. That is the only joke, and it. I don't. It maybe this was. I know the swinging '60s. This was what it was all about, maybe, and it worked. I mean, by all accounts, I think this film was very successful, really, in terms of it made its money back and all that. But maybe that's why. Maybe it was just because it had all these women on the screen, and now that just doesn't. That's just not enough. Like, you need more.
Yeah, yeah, that's like that's just what the sense I get with some of these jokes. Like, it feels like there's something missing here. It's like half a joke, so you kind of can't laugh. And it again makes me appreciate Austin Powers. Like, yes, it was made 30 years later, but it's aware of that. So Austin is actually someone who's been brought out of the 60s, and some of that is the contrast between those two. Like, there's a it's allowed to point fun at the Bond stuff because it's almost pointing fun at the 60s as a whole and having
Yeah.
fun with that and the contrast. But when you're actually just watching a film from the 60s that is just doing that stuff, it's like it's just not that funny. Like, there's just not enough here. I guess people would
Mhm.
have liked it at the time, but like it's just you just don't laugh at this stuff.
Yeah.
There's just no self-awareness because it's just them doing it. It's just like, look at all these women all the time. It's like, yeah, well done. That's nice, but it's not funny. Yeah, so Bond does get to London and he gets to MI5 and Moneypenny is there and they have a big old kiss for some reason. But Bond assumes that it's the same Moneypenny he knows, but she explains it's actually Moneypenny's daughter. And then I think at this point is basically he is taking over M's job. So because M died before, Bond is at MI5 and he is becoming the new M. And there's also some weird thing about the fact that he doesn't stutter anymore because now that he's on the job, he can go and do it. And then this leads into like another guy called Hadley, I believe, who I actually ended up quite liking.
Yeah.
And they end up like kind of talking about the situation. And this is actually a scene I kind of like with between these two, where it's very quick fire Bond jokes, where they're saying about how we have all these different types of Bonds and the current James Bond has quit to go and do television, and they're just kind of looking at all the different ones. And I think it's this scene where they make the joke about how Bond says like, because they're all dying in different ways, but it's all tied to like women, I believe, and being lured into these traps. And I think Bond says something like, "Oh, how did secret agents get the reputations of being sex-craved maniacs?" Which actually
Yeah.
made me
Yeah.
laugh.
They're like, one's a brothel, one's a ladies' sauna.
Yeah.
It's just
And yeah, I like this Hadley character. It's very basic, where he's just a very odd person, and the joke is, isn't he talking funny? And I'm like, he is talking funny. It just made me laugh. These two going back and forth. I actually thought this kind of probably what the film should be. It's quite direct references to Bond and making fun of that, but it's not being over the top and random. You understand what's going on, and it's just funny people kind of being a bit funny.
Yeah, the way he's talking, he's got such a soft voice, and he's talking about people being liquidated. It's just that's quite good. Although, what you're saying there, Tom, is that any different from the Scottish stuff? Talking funny.
Well, I think again, it's like the Scottish stuff is like they hammer that in so much, and again, it's such easy on the nose jokes like haggis, whiskey, throwing heavy things, bagpipes. Like it's all the cliches in a way where it's like not there's nothing to it. Where this guy is just kind of someone who has found a funny way of talking, and the contrast between him and Bond and them going back and forth and the things they're talking about is just kind of humorous. So
Yeah.
in a way, kind of, yeah. But I think in terms of the origin of this comedy, it's not like deep stuff or anything like that, but it's more just kind of enjoyable. It's just they've tapped into something, a funny kind of relationship and way of talking, and I can enjoy that because it's not just haha, like it's not just like super cliched, I guess.
You got to take what you can get from this film, I suppose. Yeah.
Yeah. It's again, it's a small thing. Like I was like, oh, I like him. I thought he was funny.
Yeah.
So he explains how there's lots of different agents, and then he talks about Bond's nephew, Jimmy Bond, who is in the Caribbean. And we kind of then have a flashback, I guess, where we see Jimmy Bond about to be shot by the firing squad. And he is played by Woody Allen. And I don't know a lot about Woody Allen. He's one of those characters where, or not characters, but like people where I know him more about people parodying him and making fun of him, like where people do the impression. And it was quite funny to see him in this because it's just like, oh, the impression was spot on. This is
Yeah.
it is so exactly how I expect Woody Allen to speak in a comedy film. That I was like, oh wow, they really nailed how he did things.
Yeah, I mean, I've never actually seen him. I know he's directed films as well, but I've never actually seen him in any other film.
No.
And I mean, I think in a more modern sense, he's quite a contentious figure. But yeah, in this, you're right. It was like, oh, that looks like a cliche, but actually, that is actually how he was. So
He's just doing that voice and be like, oh no, oh, like he's actually doing that.
yeah,
So we get a scene of like him about to be shot. He kind of asks for a cigarette. He then kind of uses that. I think it's like it explodes to get away. And this is actually like the first time I laughed and thought this was actually quite a good joke. I guess the stuff before I thought was quite funny, but I thought this was quite a good joke where he climbs over the wall to get away while they're all distracted, only to then land next to someone else who is also in a firing squad
that
about
is a
to
good
be
joke.
shot.
Yeah, I like that too.
And then he just kind of runs away to get away. I was like, that's quite funny. I'll give him that one. So then this is where I get a little bit confused. So I'll try and just sum this up. So Bond, the old Bond, is trying to set this all up, like trying to set up the department to fix this problem. So he kind of like has this idea of let's get an agent that is like not who like women want, but he will be trained to not want women. And then this is when we get a ton of these jokes about haha women and Bond and stuff. So Moneypenny is then in lingerie at night and is like kissing a load of guys to potentially become the new 007. And then he kisses, or she kisses one of them and ends up spending the night with this guy called Cooper. And then there's just, they spend the night together. And then that results in Cooper being named the new James Bond, of which the original Bond then says, everyone's going to be called James Bond as a confusion tactic. And yeah, I think what I would say about Cooper in this scene is the same as what we've already talked about. It's just Moneypenny not wearing much, kissing guys, and that's the joke, I think.
Well, yeah, there's no. As I was watching the scene, I was trying to work out: is there actually any funny dialogue or any jokes that maybe I'm just not getting or have been lost to time, so to speak? No, I honestly don't think there is. I honestly don't think there was any meaningful jokes in this scene. So I was kind of glad when it was over.
Yeah, and it's kind of a shame because I was kind of starting to get back into the film again. I thought this sort of stuff with Bond coming back as being M, I thought that was like, yeah, we're getting into more Bond parody stuff. And yes, this stuff is still Bond parody stuff. It's still the idea of what if Bond had to train himself off women? Ho, ho, ho. It's just not really that funny. It just doesn't really go anywhere. And I guess this Cooper fella is a pretty good Bond looking person. Like they kind of picked someone quite good. It's just not that funny because the joke is just Moneypenny is attracted to the guy. But then this does all lead into this idea of everyone is now going to be James Bond, and I don't know. I guess I can see that being a funny idea. I'm not sure if that ever really kind of pays off. And I feel like the only reason they said this is just so they could get a load of different actors who are famous to say they are playing James Bond and have these individual scenes of different people being Bond so they could make comedy off of that. Even then, I don't think that pays off. So yeah, they kind of brought me in a little bit, and then they kind of knocked me back out with this stuff.
Yeah, you're right, actually, with the whole Bond thing. I think that is absolutely the reason why they did that, just so they could put on the poster, David Niven as 007 and then Peter Sellers as 007.
Yeah.
Because if you think about it as a premise, yeah, I don't think that's a bad idea either, especially for a comedy. That could lead itself quite well to some like some sitcom-esque moments. But that only really works if there's like setups to it, and also if they're kind of in the same scenes or interacting, maybe. And I don't really think that ever really happens in this film. It's always just very siloed parts of the different Bonds doing stuff. I mean, they might come together a couple times. My memory is failing me a bit, but it has a lot of potential there, and it just doesn't go anywhere.
Yes. And something worth pointing out about this film that kind of adds to this disconnected feeling is that apparently this film had like 5 directors, and it's something you can really feel. There's this really disjointed thing about the film. A lot of the stuff, again, as we've kind of talked about with Scotland, a lot of the stuff we're explaining just doesn't get explained properly. Like, you just miss details because they don't explain it, and they just jump between all these different scenes. And then, yeah, I think some of that is because there's just a ton of different directors, and really a lot of this is just a load of comedy scenes about Bond loosely tied around this plot that just got mashed together, where everyone's kind of playing Bond and all these Bond things are happening, and it just makes it feel so all over the place. And it just kind of made me think, like, because a lot of the absurdist comedy in this film, like a lot of it is just meant to be absurd and weird and kind of shocking, and that's where the laughs are kind of coming from, just kind of stuff coming out of left field. And I was kind of like, well, why did something like Aeroplane work where this didn't work? And I think some of that is because Airplane had a very simple plot. Like, right, it was people getting on a plane, something goes wrong with the plane, and then they land the plane. And that's the film. And it kind of meant like you didn't really have to stress about that stuff at all and could just go along with it and just kind of enjoy the weirdness. And that film was very much similar to this film, as in it's a load of sketches, it's a load of individual comedy bits all kind of roughly tied together. But they were smart enough to keep it very loose and basic so they could do the comedy off of that. Where this film just doesn't have that element. So you just are so confused. And like with the James Bond stuff, you can't really laugh at the absurdity of that idea because you're just too confused about what's going on and why any of it is happening.
Yeah. Yeah. It doesn't help that I think there was also issues with the actors, like not being around, or some of them not liking each other or something along those lines. So they had to sort of tweak things in editing to make it work. I mean, those points in the film are very apparent when it's you can tell they've kind of thing like, well, how do we get to the next scene? Well, we just do this, and it makes no sense, or it's a really harsh edit. So that, along with the fact of however many directors it had, too many cooks sort of angle to it, it just doesn't mesh. Doesn't mesh at all.
No. So to wrap this part of the film up, Cooper, this new James Bond, he kind of goes through some anti-female training where, again, it's the same kind of joke. It's this Bond-like character in a room, and one by one, women are going up to kiss him, and they do a little bit of that Bond-style flirting just for Bond to be like, nope, and just flips them on the floor. So you get a little bit of that. But yeah, again, most of the joke is, look how attractive these women are, and Bond is saying no to them. What a world. Bond would never say no. Ha ha ha. Wonderful.
It's crazy.
It's madness.
The thing is, you don't really see that character very much.
No.
Afterwards, do you?
No, he's just here for that joke. He does come up later, but he's just here for that joke of what if Bond had to say no to women? It doesn't go anywhere. Like, there's no payoff to any of this. It's just, yeah, there's no payoff to it. So it's pointless.
There's no payoff unless you find men throwing women to the ground funny.
Not funny.
In which case, you probably have other issues to deal with.
Yeah.
Anyway, moving on. So, right, this is where we're going to have to start clarifying the Bond, I suppose. Old Bond. Do we stick with old Bond?
Yeah, I think old Bond.
Old Bond goes to meet I don't know where this was, but he goes to meet Miss Lind, who, if you know Casino Royale, you very quickly realise there's Vesper Lind. And she's in this room surrounded by people, and there's a very busy room, loads of reels spinning, tapes and things on the wall, and she's there buying and selling and stocks, and I'll buy I don't want the Chrysler building anymore, give me that statue. And she's clearly very powerful and rich. I don't know how, do we know how Bond gets there? Is he just there?
He's just there.
He's just there. Okay, I guess he knows.
Because they worked together before, I think is the idea, so.
Yeah, so he's there to ask her for a favour. And he kind of forces her to go along with it because then he can get rid of some tax debts that she has, apparently. And you have to remind me, does he bring up about Evelyn Tremble?
I think so. I can't quite remember because they go through the details so quickly. But that's what they agreed to do, right?
Yeah, so he's like, go and find someone called Evelyn Tremble and basically seduce him, really, is what we find out. So that's what she does. She goes to a bar or something, and he's sitting there, and Evelyn Tremble is Peter Sellers. So another big name, Pink Panther and all that, very, very popular in the 60s. He's there, and she introduces herself, and apparently Tremble is a baccarat player, and he's written a book about it, and he's very good. And she starts to talk about, there's some things I was a bit confused about when I read your book. Come back to my bed where it is, blah, blah, blah. So they head back to her. Well, she says, I'll send a car for you. Come and meet me back at my house. We then see her. Oh, I also should have mentioned Lind is played by Ursula Andress. So we actually have some Bond cast in the film, some actual Bond cast. Honey Rider herself. So yeah, she's back at her house. She's in some sort of, I don't know where she is, but she's disposing of a body. So I don't know what this is meant to mean, but there's like a body that's covered up and then it slides into a deep freeze or something, she says.
No, I got no idea. Yeah, I guess the general thing here is that Vesper is like, again, from the last scene, like she's just very busy and got a lot of stuff going on. But yeah, again, it's another joke that doesn't really pay off at all.
It just doesn't. It's just confusion.
It's just a very quick Vesper dumps a body because she's a murderer. Haha, I guess.
I guess so. Tremble arrives at the intercom and she lets him in, and they walk through her house, and it's this kind of little moment of slow-mo, and we get a song, which is actually quite a famous song. And it's weird that it came from this film. It's The Look of Love. I think Dusty Springfield sings it. Yeah. But it's a song that you'll definitely recognise, and I just had no clue it was from this film, of all films. It's so strange.
Yeah, like I recognised it as well. And looking it up, it was nominated for an Oscar for Best Original Song in a Film, which
really
is probably the most connected this film is to the rest of the Bond franchise. Because, of course, that's what normally a Bond film gets nominated for, or even wins. Like with No Time to Die and Skyfall. But yeah, it was nominated for it. It didn't win, but it got nominated.
Oh. Yeah, I mean, it's a good song. I like it.
Yeah, I like it too.
So yeah, there's this little slow-mo. They're looking around the house, and then eventually they sit in this low sofa pit and start having a bit of back and forth about the book, and yeah, I don't know. She's trying to seduce him basically, and then the sofa starts to sink down. I don't know if I'm missing anything from this scene.
No, not really. I guess
I can't. I'm trying to think if there's any dialogue, but
the reason why you might think you're missing something is because this takes bloody ages.
It does, doesn't it?
This is such a long scene when all it is just kind of a parody of, or attractive woman comes up to Bond and Bond seduces her and stuff, and they just get together really quickly. It just takes so long. It's so padded. It's just, oh god. So yeah, there might be more things to say about the dialogue, but I would say it doesn't matter. It's just all meant to be parodying on, the usual like, oh, maybe it's in my bed. Maybe you could come check it out for me. But it's just so tedious to listen to.
Should point out that this film is 2 hours and 11 minutes, I think.
Yep, it's over 2 hours long.
So yeah, definitely some padding. You're totally right. So yeah, the sofa sinks down, and then presumably they sleep together. We then just see Tremble exercising in this like oldie timey bathing suit, stripy bathing suit thing. Vesper's on the bed in slow-mo, and they're just talking to each other. And then I guess the idea of this is that Vesper has been tasked to make note of Tremble or like record him for some reason or another. So she asks him to start trying on clothes, which he's happy to do, strangely. So he heads. Well, actually, I should point out as well, this is one of the very big Austin Powers moments, isn't it? Where they're on the rotating bed and he's doing these poses on the bed. And I'm like, that's Austin Powers. That must be straight from the film when they were doing that.
Yeah, it feels so one-to-one. They must have seen this and kind of thought that's quite a funny thing to do, so we'll do it too.
Yeah, because Peter Sellers is, or was a comedic actor, I think for the most part, with Inspector Clouseau. So this is where they really are starting to get him into that swing of things. And so when she asked him to start trying on clothes, she's there with a camera and she's kind of making notes about him as he's doing all this. So he's trying on like funny hats and doing impressions. And then he's Hitler.
Then he dresses up as Hitler. Yep.
Then he's just... So, yeah, the joke is like the first couple were just hats or something small. The next time, it's a whole Hitler outfit. The whole thing.
Yeah, swastika and all.
Mustache and everything. Was that funny?
I don't think so. I could see it being funny, but I think when you just have this really long, tedious scene, and then it's just... I guess it's another one that is just shock factor, I suppose.
Oh, for sure.
But I could see that being funny, but it didn't make me laugh because I was just kind of so disconnected from everything that had happened up to this point with these two characters that it was more like, oh, okay, he's Hitler out. All right, sure, I'll pay attention, I suppose, again. But there's like no build up or setup or anything to it. It's just, wouldn't it be funny if he was Hitler? And I suppose it kind of is, but it just, I was so bored at this point.
Yeah, I mean, the idea of Hitler... I can't believe we're talking about Hitler now.
Yep.
The idea of Hitler is not inherently funny, but I suppose if they had made him do something as Hitler, there's something there, but he just stands there. So it's not as if they... It kind of reminds me a bit of Rat Race film, where there's that whole gag with John Lovitz in the car, and then... Like, that's taking Hitler and then doing a bit more with it, right? This is just Hitler is there. That's funny. But then it goes on. It goes on. Because then he's Napoleon as well, with the hat and everything. And this is where we start to get a bit more plot, I want to say, where Vesper starts to ask about Le Chiffre. We finally get some Le Chiffre talk, because he's a renowned card player, so that's how Tremble knows about him, because of the Baccarat stuff. He's also then starts dressing as a small person. I don't know if that's meant to be someone famous. I wrote in my notes Toulouse-Lautrec, maybe, who was an artist. I don't know if you've got anything, or whether you want to know.
Really. There was Napoleon, wasn't there? So yeah, I'm assuming it is someone famous, but it didn't click for me.
Yeah. So anyway, he's in another costume, and basically the conversation is Vesper will put up the £100,000 to get Tremble into a game of Baccarat with Le Chiffre. And Tremble's like, oh, no, don't joke about my work. And she says, no, I'm being serious. So that's that. And he agrees to it. So a very strange scene just to get a slither of actual plot at the end. I really do think it was...
It's so weird, though, that we get that at the end, right? Like, why? We had to watch this whole scene without really knowing why. Like, imagine if you didn't know, because when someone says Baccarat, you kind of know what they're talking about, right? If somebody is being hired who knows Baccarat in Casino Royale... You can kind of put two and two together and realize, oh, okay, he's going to be part of Le Chiffre's game. But I'm pretty sure it's the first time you hear Le Chiffre, or at least it's being described properly. So all of this was just completely pointless and nonsensical until the very end when he's dressed up as like some random person after being Hitler. And then like Vesper's like, oh yeah, we need you to take on this Le Chiffre guy who we've only just heard about, and we need you to get into this game of Baccarat. So it's like, it makes it even worse. Like, if you did not know the plot of Casino Royale, this stuff is even more confusing. It's confusing knowing it, but it must be even more confusing because you just don't know where any of it's heading.
Yeah, it feels like the majority of the scene was just they had Peter Sellers and they thought, well, he's a funny actor, so... Or maybe it was his idea. I want to dress up as Hitler. That's part of my contract. Yeah. I don't know. But it just feels like they would let him do his little thing for a moment and then, oh, right, let's get the plot tacked on at the end.
Yeah.
Well, there we go. So that was fun. So Tremble is now going to become another James Bond to take part in the competition against Le Chiffre. So he has to go to James Bond training school. It literally is James Bond training school. He comes out down into this sort of bunker-looking area, greeted by Q. It turns out to be Q, just an old man. Of course, it's going to be Q. And he's kind of taken through the Q lab effectively, and there's all this stuff going on around him. You know, the usual stuff. This is where they're a bit more on the nose of it, where there's just like experiments and people running around and just madness going on as they're walking through. There is also a dwarf that's following them, that's pointed out.
Yeah, like it's a Christmas elf, right? They're dressed
Yeah.
up as Christmas elf.
Yeah, who's apparently the security. That felt like a joke, but it wasn't. It wasn't funny. So yeah, they're all testing gadgets. Bond goes to get outfitted, and you get so there's Q. There's this new character now called Fordyce, who's this kind of camp character that's I think just meant to be funny because he's being camp. Kind of the vibe I get from it. Not great, but he's there putting on Bond's watch, which is this watch that has a little TV screen in it, kind of radio TV screen. And yeah, it's kind of Tremble just getting dressed up to be Bond. I actually didn't mind this scene as much though, because it did actually remind me of a Bond film, which is more than what a lot of this film has done.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Yeah, they kind of, I'm not going to say they fully captured this type of scene, but as a parody of that type of scene, yeah, okay, sure. Like Bond going down and a lot of silly things happening. I mean, this is where the Bond stuff would go anyway. Like you could argue some of the Pierce Brosnan stuff is actually sillier, apart from the Christmas elf. If you put that aside, like this is where the Pierce Brosnan films went. This is what Tomorrow Never Dies did, where you had someone in like And the World Is Not Enough, where someone in a giant ball and just doing all that absurd sort of stuff and Q making jokes. So it kind of went in this direction anyway. Maybe that's why it feels quite appropriate for Bond. But yeah, once again, makes sense to parody the scene. Nothing really made me laugh in it. I think there was one guy who was like chopping and showing how like amazing his chopping was, and then he just chopped himself and I think died, which actually I thought was actually that's kind of funny.
Yeah, he like goes to salute or like stand to, and then he hits himself in the head.
Yeah, he salutes himself, and his hand is so powerful he knocks himself out. That's kind of funny.
That was actually quite good. Yeah. We then cut back to old Bond and Hadley, who are talking about Smersh and how the Smersh that I forgot what it was called now. Mother's building.
Yeah, International Mother's
House. That needs to be infiltrated. And old Bond knows just the person. Matter Bond. God, I all these names.
Yeah.
Marta Bond, I think I'm going to go with, who was the daughter of the woman that we briefly heard about earlier, the one that Bond fell in love with, Mata Hari. So it's her daughter.
Like, is a real person.
Oh, really?
She's a real person. Like, because, yeah, they talk about her in this way because they mention her and being like, yeah, like as like a famous kind of person. So I looked it up and yeah, that's totally a real person. Like this didn't actually happen, but yeah, she was an exotic dancer and did like meet with spies in Germany.
What? That's a way more interesting film.
Yeah, but that's where a lot of these jokes are coming from, and a lot of this stuff that happens with the daughter is supposed to be that you know who Mata Hari is and the history of this person, because that's what they're referencing.
That's just exactly. That's case in point. That's something that was completely lost on me. I did not have any clue about that. Like, why are they going to Germany now? Why are they going to Berlin? What's going on? Okay. Oh, so was she alive when this film was made?
Oh, I don't know. Let me take a quick look. Let's see. She died in 1917, so no.
Oh, okay. Oh, fair enough.
But I guess she must have been a very famous figure around that time, I guess.
That's good to know. I mean, I don't think it makes the film much better for me, but at least I understand a bit more. Yeah.
Yeah. Again, I don't think it justifies the choices it makes with the comedy and some of these scenes, but a lot of this stuff is to directly reference a real person. So if you don't know that, which I didn't, it means so much of this stuff is like, oh, okay, I guess we're going to get to it very shortly. This next scene is much better explained if you know who Mata Hari is.
Yes. Yeah, because then, well, you might have to take over here, but Bond, that is India, right?
It has to be.
I don't know.
Right?
That's the thing they don't say. I'm like, I really don't know, but I have to guess so, yeah.
Yeah, so the next scene is that, James Bond says, I want my daughter, my illegitimate daughter, who is the daughter of Mata Hari, to be James Bond. So we're going to go and have to make her an agent. So we go to this like temple, who again, we're going to assume is India, because I don't think they say. And I think old Bond goes there. And we just have to watch like this 5-minute dance scene where it's just like a load of people in quite, again, I guess traditional Indian clothes. I'm not too sure, I'm afraid, like that sort of dancing gear, just doing a dance. And it takes ages, and I hate it because it's just so long. Like, why is this in the middle of the film?
Well, it starts off with, it's like this big set. It's a huge set. You can tell where the money was spent on sets in this film. And they start off with doing like a sort of waving of a cloth and some confetti and stuff. And I was like, oh, that's pretty. Yeah, that's nice. All right, nice way to start the scene and maybe introduce the character that's going to appear behind, which she does. But then you're right. Then you get this whole dance routine, which I don't get either, because didn't he just say that she's a bad dancer? So was that meant to be bad dancing she was doing? It looked fine for me.
I think she did well, yeah. I didn't see anything bad.
I don't know. Honestly.
I think it's one of those where it's like they could have got away with this if it was like a more focused film, right? Like if we didn't spend so much time in Scotland, if the film wasn't over 2 hours, if there was less of these different James Bonds, if it was more focused to like older Bond and her daughter, I kind of don't mind this stuff in terms of just general atmosphere and I guess vibe of the film. But when everything is so disjointed, when it's jumping all over the place, when the plot is so confusing, having this in the middle of your film just adds to the confusion. Like you just can't get away with it. So I don't really mind it from the sense of it's not really all that funny and there's no jokes in it. I think that's okay. It's just this film is too much of a mess and too much of a confusing headache for them to be able to get away with this. Like if this film was 1 hour and 30, I would be okay with it. But it's 2 hours 10. No. Like, no. You can't do this.
That's it. Yeah, it's just too long. So many of the things we've said so far could have been cut, and you wouldn't have lost anything at all.
Yes, definitely. So then we get some weird incest vibes. Just going to come out and say that, where those two are interacting.
It's true. It's true.
Because she's all like, "Well, if you weren't my daddy, I could see myself fancying you." It's like, well, don't jump for 5 minutes. Come on. I would guess the joke is Bond is so irresistible that's how that goes, but it's like, come on. No, thank you.
No.
So she is recruited, and then we get like a little bit of a debrief with her where she is going to be sent to Berlin. We get a little bit more Hadley, which I was like, I like Hadley, I like him. And then we get actually another joke I quite liked that I'll give it to them, where it's like, well, how do I get to Germany? And Hadley's like, oh, don't worry about that, get in this cab. And then Cabby's like, where are you going? And she's like, Berlin. And he's like, rightio. And then they drive off and it just cuts to him pulling up to like the wall between West and East Berlin. And he's like, here you go, that'll be £480. She's like, well, I don't have any money. And he's like, oh, you bloody, give me my money.
Yeah, I really like that joke too. It's just so stupid, but that's the sort of humor that I actually quite like. Especially because it's like East Side, West Side. It's like West Side. All right, then yeah, that's fine.
Yeah, where you going, love?
And it's Bernard Cribbins as well. It's nice to see him.
Yeah. So she gets dropped off. She then goes into like part of the wall, I believe what this is meant to be, like the Smersh operation. There's a wall, and she kind of goes down this secret passage and ends up in basically a spy training school. And Ronnie Corbett's there.
Yeah.
Hello, Ronnie Corbett.
Hey.
Didn't expect you. It's so weird, right? Because this film was in like 1967 and Ronnie Corbett still looks quite old. I was like, He looks way younger than he did before he passed away, I think, about a few years ago. But I guess Ronnie Corbett always looked kind of old.
Yeah, that's often a blessing or a curse. But I mean, yeah, it's kind of like the Steve Martin thing where they've just looked old for a long time, so they never age.
Yeah, he definitely had that vibe. So yes, there's a more like strict woman there as well. Don't remember her name, and Ronnie Corbett. And there's like a little bit of back and forth where she has to kind of convince them who she is. And the only reason they let her into spy school is because she's the daughter of Mata Hari, who we now all know was a real spy. So that's why she was allowed in. And then there's a very kind of weird, uncomfortable scene about the bed and Ronnie Corbett kind of having a thing for her, and you get a little bit of awkwardness between those two before eventually she's kicked out. Again, a lot of these jokes around here are just jokes about Mati Hari, really. So then I can't call her James Bond, can I? I guess Marty.
Jane Bond. Ha 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 ha.
That's a good one. So she's like, she then starts like looking around. So she leaves the room, like she gets put into this room as part of the spy academy. She then starts kind of looking around, trying to find stuff. There's like a dead guy who's like, is he actually dead? But they're like, no, that's just how he looks like. It's like I guess an old German general, I would guess, like covered in dust and cobwebs. And I think eventually, I can't remember exactly how, because again, this is just such a blur. She kind of learns that there's this auction going on and that they're actually auctioning off all these different paintings. Oh, not the paintings, sorry. No, is it the paintings?
It's like, it ends up being blackmail material.
Yeah, that's the one. Like they're auctioning off these blackmail photographs to raise money, which, again, if you know the story of Casino Royale, that makes sense that Le Chiffre is trying to raise money. But if you don't, then you just have no idea what's going on. But yeah, Le Chiffre is trying to raise money. And then there's some jokes here about like Le Chiffre isn't real. Who is Le Chiffre? Someone says Le Chiffre and they say Le Chiffre and they're like, I don't know about no Le Chiffre. I have no idea what you're talking about. And then this cuts to a big hall of these different kind of people of different nationalities, all bidding for the paint or the photos. Sorry. And the auctioneer is also another Bond guy.
Yeah.
The guy from Russia with Love, I believe the chess master, that's early on in the film. He plays the auctioneer. And I was like, oh.
I was trying to remember, is he number 3 or number 4 or number 2? It was one of the early
It's like 5
ones.
or 3, I want to say.
Yeah.
So then there's a joke. This is another one. Again, it does make me laugh from time to time, where each of the nationalities kind of stand up to explain how they're going to be bidding. And this stuff didn't really make me laugh, where like the Americans are more laid back about it. The Japanese are more like very shouty about it, about how we'll bid when we want to bid, we stand up, and then we'll sit down when we don't want to bid. And then eventually the British guy stands up and be like, well, I suppose we'll do a little bit of both. Is that okay with you, chaps? And they're like, oh, very good, very good. There was something about how British that guy was, and the whole parody of British people being just kind of laid back and indecisive. I thought was quite funny. I
thought that the setup for that, where they're all describing the different ways they were going to bid, I thought that was going to lead to something more, or maybe that is actually what we got. But I thought it was going to be like a proper slapstick moment where they're all going up and down and there's just general confusion. But then it very just quickly resorts to like cliche stuff about vodka and rice. So I think it was a bit of a strange. I thought that was going to go better than it did, unfortunately.
No, yeah, I think you're right. That probably should have gone that way, maybe. I just like the British joke. But yeah, you're right. It's then straight back. Like the bidding actually begins. Marta Bond is going off to investigate or looking around, and we hear them, Japanese people saying, we bid 10 bags of rice, and the Russian people say a crate of vodka and that sort of thing. But eventually she finds the pictures and steals them, or and tries to get away. And this causes a lot of craziness to start happening, where they kind of realize she's stolen them. So people are trying to go after her. And we have Ronnie Corbett show up, because there's like a joke with Ronnie Corbett's character where he's running on a battery. Like he just has a battery attached to him. And it's like there's some jokes like which are just puns of being like low on power and stuff. And the way she kind of stops this guy is by like unplugging his heart battery thing, which I just don't. I want to enjoy it because it's absurd. It's just so absurd that I didn't enjoy it.
I commend you for getting through this whole bit in Berlin as far as you have without. I mean, I'm looking through my notes here, and I mean, I just to take a step back briefly, the moment when Marta Bond enters this building, it's immediately weird. Like the set and the design of everything is, I think, meant to be German expressionism. I think I might be right in that. Like it's a period where there's like Nosferatu, if anyone knows about that, and how that looks like. Those are sharp angles and black and white and everything. I mean, it looks like a cartoon. Doesn't look like a real place. Any of these things that she's looking in and looking around, the stairways are all wonky and all that sort of stuff. And then when she's being shown around by the Ronnie Corbett and the woman, she's showing these rooms where it's meant to be decoding room, and it's like this giant red room with women just like dancing in there and stuff like that. And then there's a karate room where it's all like a pure white room with fast forwarded people doing karate, so they look really funny. It's honestly bizarre. It's like Willy Wonka, some of this stuff, and how you described it is like that is actually what happens. But when you're watching it, it's just so much weirder because of the environment that's going on in. It's just honestly so strange.
Yeah, I guess I was trying to keep to the high level points, but you're right. So much of this scene is infused with just stuff that doesn't really make sense. Like, there's just some rooms are just completely grey. It's like you probably described it more tastefully, but it's like the Addams Family or something.
Yeah.
That's probably more of a mainstream low-key reference. But yeah, it's something like that. It doesn't make sense, but it's not. Again, I want to, like, as we talk about it, I want to like it. I want to just kind of get on board. I want to get on the train, which is this film, and just enjoy all this weirdness. Enjoy that Ronnie Corbett has a heart battery that gets unplugged, but it's not funny. It's not funny. It just doesn't make me laugh. And it just kind of expects you to go along for the ride, but it's not strong enough in plot or comedy or character to make that work. So you're just instead you just have insanity going on. And there were just times I was just looking at my phone because even though what was going on screen was insane, it's like so insane. It's like insanity and weirdness are relative, right? Like it's a relative thing. So when everything is bizarre and makes no sense, like it doesn't matter. Like you just don't care. Like it goes too far to the point where I can't enjoy the weirdness because it's all weird. Like there's nothing relative in the film to make it feel exaggerated because it's all exaggerated, which means I ended up just kind of being bored by a lot of this and not paying as much attention as I probably should have been.
I totally get that. I do. Like you need balance. Even with a spoof film, you need some balance, otherwise it is just kind of pointless or overwhelming. I think the thread that I was still on by this point in the film wasn't the humor, wasn't the plot, wasn't anything else apart from what on earth is going to happen next. Like that, the shock is what has got me, and that's not a good place to be, to be honest. Like just pure curiosity about what on earth they're going to show on screen next. Because everything else by that point had sort of got exhausting, to be honest.
Yeah, I think I can see that.
We're not even that far into the film either.
We're pretty decent way into the film. Although that's another problem with the film, right? The pacing of it's quite bad because you kind of don't know how far you are into the film. Like, you kind of lose yourself a little bit. I ended up watching this into 2 sessions because I was so bored after the first half. I paused it. I just was like, tomorrow.
We're done here.
Which I usually split up some of these Bond rewatches just because I do notes and it takes a lot of time and I want to try and put my thoughts together and it's kind of easier to digest in 2 parts. This one was more just like, this is kind of just a boring film. I think I'll just do an hour and then finish off the rest tomorrow, which did help. But again, the pacing of the film gives a very bad sense of where you are actually at because you don't really get a good sense of the plot as a whole, which again ties into the boredom more for me because it's like, well, where do I sit with all of this? I don't know. I don't know how much the film has actually progressed because it's all just so weird and random.
Yeah. Yeah, you're right. I suppose with a regular Bond film, you have those parts that you know. I guess it's that you have like a typical film. I can't remember what the phrase is now, but when it comes to story writing, you have the structure, the arcs.
Yeah, you got like a 3-act structure and the story beats you would expect, right? That sort of stuff.
This film does not have that. This film is just it's its own thing. So when you think it's near the end, well, no, not quite. And then when you think you're maybe halfway through, no, you're not even there yet. So yeah, it's
yeah.
You really, I mean, I don't blame you for taking a break. I really don't.
Yeah.
It does get quite grating after a while.
Definitely. So to wrap up Berlin, so she's trying to escape, and we just get chaos where everyone just starts fighting each other in like a very silly way. You have like the spies fighting, and then the taxi driver from before, the cabbie, comes out and starts like fighting and helping her out. And then all the different like the British and the Japanese, they're all there, and um, also like a fire extinguisher gets pulled out, and just everyone gets sprayed. So everyone's also just slipping and covered in like foam. And then we have a very big city fight scene, which eventually they do get away. The cabbie kind of gets her out of there. They drive away. And then the auctioneer goes onto the phone because tries to chase him down, but they got away with the pictures. So calls up Le Chiffre, and we get a look at Le Chiffre for the first time, who's played by Orson Welles. I guess maybe we'll talk about him in a bit because there's a very brief scene with him. The auctioneer says, "Oh, like we don't have the pictures; they're gone. We're not going to be able to make the money." So Le Chiffre blows him up as punishment, and that blows a hole in the wall. And you see a rush of people from the east side trying to storm to get into the west side.
Yeah, that made me laugh. That was a good joke. I like that. Just how quickly there's these people spilling out into
Just ready to go. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, that was good. Yeah, so that guy just cannot catch a break in any Bond film, can he?
Yeah.
Poor guy. Anyway, let's get moving. So there's a plane. There's a plane that's landing, and we see that it's Tremble. It's Tremble now let's call him Tremble Bond. And he's in France. He's going through security. Welcome to France. Then he just punches the security man. Clearly you found that funny.
I found it funny.
I don't get... was there no setup? Was that the joke because he just chooses to punch him?
I mean, you can choose to take it as in he's French, so he punches him because he's French.
Okay, yeah, now I'm liking it.
I could kind of get that angle because Bond is British, right? So the Brits don't like the French. So he just punches him because of that. I also kind of like to take it as just Bond just being kind of psychotic, like, and never to that level, of course. But the thing that makes me really laugh about that isn't that by itself, is that this is actually a joke that then sets something like another line up where he just punches him for no reason. And then later on, you just have old Bond talking to Hadley being like, well, he must have had a reason to punch him. I don't know why you would do that otherwise. And then it just moves on. This actually might be my favorite joke in the film. Not just because of the punching, but because you get them talking about it later.
Well, I was about to bring that up. I mean, you describing that is way more funny than me when I was actually just watching it. I don't know. It's one of those things where, yeah, when you're hearing it, you're like, that's really funny. But in the moment, I was just nothing. I was completely deadpan.
I think that's what I had. Yeah, what I was talking about before with the disconnect. I had that with some of these other jokes, but this one just... it just
a mark.
It's the way it can work, right? Like it's the way this film could work and be a good parody of Bond. It just kind of isn't, but you can kind of see it every now and then. And this one, just the things like, oh, I mean, he must have had a reason.
Well, yeah, because immediately, oh yeah, sorry, he goes to meet a man in a car. Is that Mathis?
Yes, that's Mathis.
Yes, he goes to meet Mathis in the car, and they go through a car wash. And it's like a sexy car wash with more women, obviously. But then, yeah, the next scene straight after is old Bond and Hadley back in London. And you're right, Bond's just like, well, is he a double agent? Maybe he's a double agent. Why would he have done that?
Why would he do that?
And that's it. That's literally that whole scene. Then we go back to Tremble, and he's meeting another Bond woman, Good Thighs in this case, who comes in and she's got a bottle of champagne, and he's been trained as Bond, so he tries to pull the moves and shoot the bottle off, and he misses. He does do it eventually though, and they have some champagne together on the bed, and they start to kiss, and she plops a pill into his champagne glass, and then he then puts another one in when she's not looking. So I didn't quite get what was going on here, like they were trying to poison each other or something, but no. Tremble eventually passes out in the bathroom and gets woken up by Vesper. And it turns out he didn't know what was going on. He was trying to put in an antidote pill, but it didn't work or something. I don't know.
Yeah, I got really confused by this because I took it what you did, where, again, she's trying to poison him, and the joke is that he is then going to poison her bag. But no, actually, it's the antidote thing, which might just be tied to what happens in Casino Royale. I'll be honest, I don't know the exact details from the book. But obviously, from the Daniel Craig film, we know that happened. So I guess it's meant to be that, just a slightly funny version of it. It just doesn't. They just don't show it properly, and I think the antidote does work because he doesn't die, but he still passes out. But it's just not clear.
Yeah, bit clunky. Bit clunky that. I also skipped over, maybe for good reason, when he collapses, there's a little song. There's a little ditty that plays. It's like I don't know how you would describe that type of music, but it's like one man on a guitar, like a little plucky guitar singing about James Bond in Casino Royale, and then you get some kind of dreamy shots of cards and smoke and him and Vesper together. Very, very strange. Couldn't explain
again,
it.
this is probably a lazy comparison, but it just felt like a Monty Python kind of song, right? Something I can like Eric Idle singing, where it's just a very basic song playing like James Bond's doing the casino. Like it's that sort of thing.
Yeah, I didn't like that. Going to be honest with you. Kind of glad that was quite short and over. So yeah, Vesper wakes him up, and they head to the Casino Royale. They're going to go and finally play against Le Chiffre. And this is where we see Le Chiffre at the table, played by Orson Welles. We've seen him very briefly. And, Orson Welles, that's a big name. Everyone knows Orson Welles. Very, very big character. And he's there in his white tux at the baccarat table. And as Le Chiffre, he's doing some magic tricks because he likes to, work the crowd. And so he gets this this woman from the crowd and gets her to lay on the table, and she levitates and then disappears. I don't know if that's part of the book or obviously not making her levitate and disappear. But does he like put on a show for people?
I have no idea. I would guess absolutely not. I would be very surprised if Le Chiffre in the book was doing magic tricks for everyone.
Yeah, maybe it's just because it was Orson Welles. I don't know why they chose to put this spin on him, but
I don't think it's a bad spin, really. Yeah, I think it's kind of funny, but what really sells it is Orson Welles.
Exactly. He can pull it off. He's like this charming figure. He's got this big, deep voice. It just all works. Anyone else, I don't think it would have quite worked. But yeah, he's there doing that at the table. Bond and Vesper, Tremble and Vesper come in, and they go and submit the 100K. I don't know if there's meant to be like bits about Bond still trying to like get into being Bond and saying the right stuff here. It's not funny. And they go to meet, I think, are they the casino owners or something like that? Two men in a room, or are they MI5?
I think they're the casino owners because I want to say they're evil later.
Oh, okay.
And just because of what's going on with this casino, we find out later, it'd be weird if they weren't in on that. So I think they're just helping out MI5 here, but probably not in the long term.
Well, they do have lots of scary tigers in the room, which is something the film likes to point out. Not real tigers, I should point out. Stuffed tigers or tiger rugs and stuff. So they're there. They can see behind a one-way mirror that there's the chief. Bond has these glasses, the same type that they see Le Chiffre is wearing, and it turns out they're infrared. So he's basically cheating, and you can see the cards when they're on the table. You can see the suit and the number and all that. So Le Chiffre's cheating. Shocking. I don't know if there's anything else from the scene, really.
Not really. It's all just kind of set up, and yeah, again, I wasn't super into Peter Sellers doing the whole rubbish Bond thing either. Just it's not a bad idea. It didn't really make me groan. I didn't really dislike it, but I don't know. I just didn't feel quite right. It's quite interesting now that we're into the actual casino itself, because this part does have a little bit of a different vibe, and this is when we do kind of, I guess, get a glimpse of the more traditional Bond parody we could have got, where it is just somebody playing Bond, just being a little bit more clumsy about it and having a villain. This is maybe one of the more sensible scenes in the film.
Yeah, it is. And that's kind of like not why you'd want to watch this. Like, if you want that, then you would just watch a Bond film, right?
Yeah.
There's no entertainment here. unless you just really like Peter Sellers and Orson Welles, in which case Bond goes to join the table of Baccarat, and whilst Le Chiffre is distracted kind of with the introductions, Vesper grabs his cheaty glasses, and we get a little bit back and forth between Le Chiffre and Bond, kind of, making little digs and setting the scene for the card game. They also like to throw in some strange accents for Bond. This is something that strikes me as Peter Sellers wanted to do this because he thinks he has a really good Indian accent and then later on a Chinese accent, but it is just so weird. He starts to say these phrases in these really over-the-top accents. Not great, gonna be honest.
Yeah,
Not
it's
a big
like
fan of that.
ancient wisdom sort of thing, right? Like it's parodying that idea. Like, well, the Chinese have a phrase, only imagine if it was exaggerated and you had someone just doing a city accent alongside it. But I do
Exactly.
like I do like Orson Welles' reaction where he's like, I don't think I know what you're saying or what you're talking about.
Yeah, it's a nice bit of kind of realism there. Like, well, yeah, what on earth are you talking about? I also did like he does another trick, Le Chiffre here with like a napkin or handkerchief, and then it turns into all these flags. But it just goes so ludicrously over the top, where he ends up with handfuls of flags, and then these people with sparklers behind him, and then these
Yeah.
doves just start flying out. So yeah, I think when it just gets stupid like that, I don't mind it. Like looking straight at the camera, and it's just dumb, but better than the levitating one. I'll say that. So yeah, the Tremble, as Bond mentions about Tremble, the Chief's not interested. They start to actually play Baccarat, but the problem is, I don't know how it works. This is the reason why they changed it to poker for the 2006 film, because you get like the bonk and the big paddle, and the person flipping the cards. There's like a 3 and a 2. I don't know. Is that good? It's basically just you rely on what the film does to be like, oh, okay, no, Bond just lost then. And then they do it again, but he trebles the bank. So there's like basically going all in with the money now, and more cards are revealed. But this time, oh, that's good. Okay, apparently what happened was good, and then Bond actually won that round.
Yeah,
No
I'm not
clue.
too sure how much of this was supposed to be like a silly joke in itself. I was thinking that because they just get the same cards every single time, like a 2 and a 3. So I thought they were just making a joke about the idea of them having this insanely intense game, but they were just getting such low numbers that you wouldn't normally
Oh,
get, that I thought
yeah.
that was the joke, but I'm not confident enough in my knowledge of Baccarat to confirm that. But it did kind of make me laugh that they kept just getting like a 5, like a 2 and a 3 every single time. And then they were like sweating about like such low numbered cards. Because I'm pretty sure that was the joke. Because I think Baccarat does work roughly on the 21 sort of rules, doesn't it? Right? Like it's not blackjack, it's different. But when Bond plays Baccarat in the other Bond films, I'm pretty sure it does follow that rough structure.
Okay, I really cannot remember, but that sounds. Yeah, let's go with that.
I
Let's
guess
go
it's the
with that.
most nice version or interpretation of
Yeah.
the scene. If it's not that, then this is just bad because it's just boring. You don't know what's going on. They make no effort to explain it. There's no jokes. But if it is that, then I think that's kind of funny. But it also does rely on you having some sort of knowledge of this. So it's maybe it's not great either way. But that's how I think it's meant to be taken.
Hmm. Yeah. Well, and then Le Chiffre loses. That's it.
Yep.
I actually can't remember what happens next, to be honest.
All right. Yeah, I'll take over. Yeah, so Vesper, like basically, there's a quick thing where they're like, "Well done, congratulations, James." Like, I don't think there's many kind of jokes here. They go upstairs and talk to the casino owner about getting the check for the money because part of this was that Bond or Evelyn Tremble was going to get like a cut of this, and they were going to then take that money. So they then kind of go and sort that out, and then they go outside, and I think Vesper's just kidnapped. I can't remember if they do that in a funny way or not. I think they just grab her and throw her in a car.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, so then Tremble is or Bond is then like gonna go after her, and we got another bit that which is again kind of funny, where they're like, "You'll never catch him," and then like Bond like is in a full racing gear, like in all this like what would you call that, like a jumpsuit sort of thing, and then puts on a helmet and then gets in like an old racing car rather than like a proper car. and then like goes to chase the sheaf in that.
Doesn't he like wink straight at the camera as well?
Yeah, he looks right at the
Completely breaks
camera
the
before
fourth
he then
wall.
speeds off. It's kind of funny.
I liked a little bit before that where he talks to the doorman, like, "Oh, have you seen a woman in a green dress?" He's like, "Oh, a woman with a black bag over her head being taken away." It's just stupid. It's just stupid. But
Yeah. Oh, I think
that
it's
tickled me.
also I don't know if it's the doorman or somewhere else, but like he goes up to like a driver, and he was like, "After that car," and then he just runs up. He just sprints off screen to go just run it down. That was a funny joke.
Yeah.
It's weird how many jokes that I actually found funny in this film because I just want to reinforce it did not feel like that at all when watching it.
No.
Like I'm only appreciating a lot of these little jokes that I actually did find funny while talking about it with you because I don't have to sit down and actually watch the film. But like there's a lot in there that's actually kind of funny. It's just a shame about everything else. But yeah, at the time I wasn't enjoying it, but now that we break it down, there was actually a lot of jokes I enjoyed, which is quite surprising considering how much of a bad time I had watching this.
So what we're actually suggesting to any listeners is if you have not watched Casino Royale 1967 version yet, just read the script.
Read
the script. Don't bother with the film itself. You'll have just as good a time, or actually a better time.
Listen, I'm going to put together a TikTok compilation. The top funniest parts of Casino Royale 1967. So that's going to be trending. So get excited for that. The film is rubbish, but that is hilarious. You got to check this stuff out.
Oh, I can't wait.
Yeah. So he drives off, and then just gets captured. I don't really remember how that happens, or if they even show that.
They literally show like one. Let's just show a light. They just show a light for a split second, and then he's suddenly in a chair.
Yeah, so Bond is then in this chair, and the sheaf is kind of looking at him. There's like they do kind of reference the fact that there's no bottom to it, but that doesn't really go anywhere. But of course, if you know Casino Royale, the bottom of the chair, yeah, we won't go into that. So then there's like a torture scene, and I guess they have the excuse that they can go off the rails, but this really goes off the rails. Like it's just a lot. It's a big old dream sequence, and the kind of highlight of it, I guess, is him being in this big room with a load of like Scottish people again in like kilts and stuff.
They're obsessed.
They're just obsessed. They're just completely obsessed. And like I think Bond talks to them or something like that. Again, it's all it's very deliberately shot to be dreamlike. But then Vesper, I guess, somehow has escaped and like machine guns everyone down. And then while that is happening, somebody breaks in and kills the sheaf and shoots him in the head. And that's the last that we see of the sheaf.
And Tremble.
No.
Right? Because she kills him.
Does she?
I think she then... Because she... Well, look, this whole scene, as you say, is very strange.
Oh, maybe. Yeah.
But she guns down all the bagpipers, but then I swear she then kills Tremble.
Maybe. I just thought it was in his head. But maybe it wasn't in his head. Maybe it did actually happen. What?
I don't know. I mean,
I guess he's not in the rest of the film, is he? I can't think of any time that Tremble appears. So yeah, you must be right. He got killed.
I have a feeling, now I don't have anything to back this up apart from maybe reading Wikipedia ages ago. So take this with a big pinch of salt. I have a feeling this is something they must have done because Peter Sellers was like, I'm out now, I don't want to do any, I'm done filming. And they had to scrap together a way to write him out of the film. So they just made him die by Vesper. Could be completely wrong, but it would make sense as to why it's over so quickly and then you never see him again.
Well, yeah, I mean, yeah, considering what happens next, I guess it doesn't matter, does it?
Yeah.
At the end of the day. Yeah, so that's kind of that. And again, I think it is kind of a big shame. Obviously, you don't really want a serious Bond film and plot with Peter Sellers and Orson Welles like this. But again, I can see another version of this film, which is a more focused parody, which actually properly has these two as the villain or the rivalry there. I can kind of see it. I can kind of see that. That's probably different from the film I was seeing earlier. But if you kind of focus it a little bit more, I probably would have quite liked that. But yeah, the Sheaf stuff, Orson Welles, as awesome as Orson Welles is, he's dead. He's gone. Peter Sellers, I've just found out he's dead.
Sorry to break the news.
So all this is kind of done now, but we've still got what, like half an hour of the film left to do?
Oh,
And now everyone's kind of dead a little bit.
They fit a lot into this last half hour as well. My goodness.
Oh, do you want to say it? Do you want to say what happens next, or should I do it?
I'd like you to do it, please.
Okay, cool. So, yeah, we go back to London and we go back to old James, where he's going to Downing Street, and it's like a job well done. Because there was the whole thing with the money and the check, but the chief is dead, so everyone's super happy. So Bond's daughter, or Martha Bond, is there, and she's not allowed into Downing Street. So as she's walking through London, someone on horseback charges at her, picks her up, starts going through the streets, and then we cut to a UFO in the sky flying in, and that just lands in the middle of Trafalgar Square. Is that?
Yeah.
Yeah, Trafalgar Square. Yep. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have questioned. Of course it is. It just lands in the middle of Trafalgar Square, and you see some British people just kind of look a little bit not that fast, to be honest. And then the guy,
what's this then?
yeah, so what's all? Oh, bloody hell! And then the guy on the horse carrying Martha Bond just goes into the spaceship, and then that takes off and just flies away.
Oh, all right. So I forgot that there was a UFO bit in this film. I actually did forget. I knew that it gets weird at the end, but I forgot about that. As I was writing some notes, I think I was literally just writing, Marta gets spied on by horse. So I looked down at my notebook to write that. I look up, there's a UFO. It's just like, how long have I been looking down for? In the span of just a few seconds, suddenly this UFO is landing. And that's when I was like, oh yeah, that's right. There's a spaceship.
So I'm kind of repeating myself. I want to like it. I do want to like it. I do just want to enjoy the absurdity of it. It just doesn't feel earned, and it seems weird to describe it this way. How do you earn that? But it's like by being a good film. You can, by being funnier, you can have this absurd kind of thing fly in, but it just doesn't feel right. Like it just happens. And I think that, I mean, the thing that I did kind of like was the image of the guy on the horse just riding into a UFO. But apart from that, everything else just feels so like out of nowhere, where it's like, it is funny on paper. It just wasn't funny to actually watch. I was just like, oh, is that what we're doing now? Is that what we're doing?
Yeah.
Okay, why not? I guess nothing matters. Nothing matters anymore. Why not?
I'm trying to work out whether I could have ever found that funny, because I'm trying to think back onto the things that I've said, and a lot of things you've agreed with, we've found funny in during the course of the film, and it is silly stuff a lot of the time, but I don't think it's like out of the realm of possibility. Like, no. I don't know, the wall blowing up and then loads of people rushing through. I mean, it's kind of based on a bit of reality there. It's just, very very exaggerated. Same thing with when he climbs over the firing squad wall and lands in another one. It's stupid, but it's not, it's still grounded in something. This is just a step too far, I think, even for a spoof film for me. Where this last half hour goes in terms of like rushing in at a lot of plot and strange visuals, it's really evident that like a version of the film ended with that bit in with the sheaf, and then there's this bit, and I don't quite know where that comes from in terms of probably like the script and the writing and the different directors, but it's definitely like a line in the sand at this point in the film, and this last bit is just like, right, I'm not even going to try. Like, I'm not even going to try and get on board with this now. Just let it play out.
Yeah, I can see that. I think you're right. Like, there's, I guess, when you want to explain what is the joke, which again maybe is not fair, but if you were to think about what is the joke, it's like, well, the joke is UFOs. Like, it's a UFO, and I guess in another type of film that might have worked. It just kind of didn't. And as you say, the other jokes with light actually have kind of been jokes to some degree, where this kind of just isn't.
Yeah. So once Marta has been kidnapped in the UFO, we cut back to old Bond, who's in the office, and he's on the phone and is ordering the army or the police to tail it, and there's no fast planes anymore. But as that happens, there's a knock at the door, and a nun is there, to ask for a collection, for the charity. And it's Fiona again, or Agent Mimi, or what you want to call her. She went off to the convent before. She's back, and she gives Bond a receipt for the donation he gives, and then there's a little message on there about going to Casino Royale for some reason. That's where you need to go. Well, that's where Marta's going to be taken. So that kind of like sets off this last portion of the film. We see the escape pod. We see the UFO, and an escape pod launches from it and goes out into a cave. Cave door opens in the side of a cliff, and it heads in. And we also see Old Bond and Moneypenny Jr. Are now at Casino Royale as well. So they're taken up to that same room we saw before with all the tigers in it, and they're sort of pounced on by all these goons. It's meant to be a bit of a funny fight scene where they're all, they're trying to fight and they're doing some, like, Old Bond is like still winning really easily and throwing him around, and yeah.
Are these the Scottish people again?
Are they? They might be.
I barely remember this bit.
Yeah.
I want to say it's once again just a load of like big Scottish guys trying to fight Bond.
So they're all on the ground because Bond deals with them, and the room's also descending at this point. I think they press like the eye of the tiger, and it starts to descend. But then they all just have guns. So I guess they all have guns, and they force Bond and Moneypenny to go through these curtains. And as they go through, it ends up leading into this big sort of lair, it looks like. There's this voice overhead that talks about Smersh, and Dr. Noah is a name that you hear. And okay, no clue who that is. But actually, I think you did hear it once before in the film, but it doesn't really matter. They're being followed by the goons, like to make sure they're going the right way. They do this little trick to knock them over, and they go like running through to try and find out what's going on in here. This is where you can they spent a lot of money on sets here, because they go into this big circular room and it's got like a big spiral on the ground and all these doors around it. There's this big colourful hallway they go through. It is very Willy Wonka, honestly. And then they eventually end up leaving this doorway, and they're in sort of like a big eye-shaped bit, and they're looking out, and they see the silhouetted figure that we saw before, the Smersh leader, with this deep voice. And I can't remember how. Oh my god, I forgot about this. I'm trying to work out how Bond shoots the glass of where this silhouetted figure is. It turns out there's also like clones, because there's this clone of Bond that comes out. This is where I'm going to struggle trying to explain a lot of stuff, because it's just, how can you?
I completely forgot there was a clone until you just said.
Yeah, there's a clone of Bond who has a gun, and then the real Bond takes him out, takes the gun and shoots the glass. And the big gag is that as the glass is falls away, you see what was behind it, and it is the baddie is the Smersh guy, but it's actually just Woody Allen. It's Jimmy Bond all along. He's been behind it all, and he's there in his little Woody Allen way. As Bond and Moneypenny go up to him, and there's this little bit about he's behind some glass and his miming, or he can't talk to Bond because he's too intimidated by him. We eventually learn that he plans some biological warfare by turning every woman beautiful and also killing every man over 4 foot something. So basically, he's going to become the best man there is. He's got a bit of an inferiority complex, basically. And he hits a gong, and all these beautiful women enter the room to take them away, to take Bond and Moneypenny away. All in meanwhile, he's doing all the silly gags, he falls over a chair, or a lot of slapstick stuff. I kind of realised at this point I don't actually like Woody Allen. I don't know how else to say it really, but he just rubs me the wrong way. Something about him.
I just think he just wasn't funny at all. That other scene was quite short, and it was quite focused on a joke, and it was quite a good joke. But when he's doing there's so much physical comedy, when he's moving all his arms and stuff, it's just no humor or comedy to it. it's like trying really hard to be funny, but the whole bit about how so Jimmy Bond can't speak in front of old Bond because he's too nervous. So instead, we just get this funny signing bits where he's waving his arms in order to try and speak, and it's so unfunny. It's so bad. It's so just like stop, just sit down and stop doing that, please. Like Woody Allen, I'm with you on this one. He is awful in this film. There is just nothing funny about this character at all. It's so cliched. His physical comedy is so not funny, and it's just kind of unpleasant to have him on screen for the rest of this because it's just and especially because this is what it was all building up to. Like maybe in a more better focused film, this would make some sense and might be enjoyable, but this just completely comes out of nowhere. And the payoff is that you now get to watch Woody Allen being unfunny for the rest of the film. And it's painful at times.
Well, I'm sorry to say there's more.
Ah.
There's more of Jimmy Bond. So yeah, old Bond and Moneypenny are taken away. We see Jimmy Bond goes into a room and there's a woman naked, although she's like strapped and covered by the straps on this table. It's the same woman that we saw earlier on when Cooper Bond was doing some like the tests against him. But she's there. Don't know how she got there, but she is. And clearly Jimmy Bond has a bit of an obsession with her and he's really trying to show off. He's trying to show off and think, well, I'm just like the older Bond. I can do everything he does. So he does this little routine where, he goes around and starts to play the piano and he plays Debussy really well. But actually it was a self-playing piano. And then he goes and punches a punching bag ball thing and it hits him in the back and it's so silly. Then he's on a horse and he's fallen off the horse. Oh God. This bit was really bad.
Yeah, this whole scene, this might be the worst scene in the film.
This might be. I mean, this is the first time I wrote cringe. Now, you could say that for a lot of the film, but I actually didn't find it cringy. This was the first part I actually thought was cringy to me.
Yeah, I think it was more boring or just kind of weird in a way that wasn't great. But yeah, I agree that they're trying so hard to make this funny or interesting that I think that's what makes it cringy, because it's like, guys, you just don't have a good idea. And like, why are we just stopping the film for this? To have a naked woman like strapped down while Woody Allen is doing his thing? Like, this is just awful. Like, this is just really bad. Like, you haven't earned this with the plot. You haven't earned this with the comedy. This is just awful. Yeah, bad. Really bad.
Okay, yeah, right. Well, I'm going to have to try and squeeze in a lot of plot now. Wish me luck. Because it all kind of comes out in the next 5 minutes, how this film is wrapping up, or at least some justification for why it's Woody Allen and this is happening. So, I'm just looking at my notes trying to make sense of this. Woody Allen, Jimmy Bond, has created a pill which turns people into an atomic bomb, basically. And after a certain amount of time, they blow up. So he shows the woman on the table this pill, but then he kind of like drops it and it's on the ground, or he just forgets about it. And tying into this plan is he has created copies of world leaders, hence why we saw the clone of Bond earlier. And these world leaders are taking place of the real ones, and he will then rule the world because they'll do his bidding. And he'll be the leader of the world, and he wants this woman to be the co-leader with him. And she starts to play along with this, having spotted the pill and how he's forgotten about it. So she's like, "Oh yeah, I'll do this. Unlock me, and I'll do what you want." And so she gets up, starts to get dressed, makes him look away as she's getting dressed, and that's when she grabs the pill. And that's that. It's a lot of stuff there, which ultimately doesn't really mean much, but it does explain why you see some bits later on, because otherwise you'll be like, what? Why is Fidel Castro there? So
sure.
Yeah. Meanwhile, old Bond, Moneypenny, and also Marta, and I think, is that Cooper again? That's where Cooper comes back.
Coop just shows up here for some reason. Like, he wasn't in the film for ages. You don't see anything. He's just now here. But I have no idea why.
No idea. They're in this very, very strange looking room filled with pillows, and I don't know, but they're trying to escape this vaulted room, which they eventually do by, there's like these sacks, I don't know, which are filled with an explosive gas, and they explode the vault open. Enough of that. We see Jimmy Bond and the woman enter a room. Is it meant to be? They say aircraft at one point. It doesn't look like one. But there's loads of seats in there, and this is where you see some of the world leaders that he mentioned about. So there is like, you can clearly see Fidel Castro is there, and some other famous world leaders. I don't know who they were, some of them, but it's at this point where she's on board with the plan, trying to trick him. So she's like, "Oh, champagne, great, let's have a drink to this," and that's where she plants the pill. Great stuff.
Yeah. Got nothing else to add apart from, like, again, we're nearly done. We've got like 10 minutes left, and this is where we're at, which just feels insane.
It
really,
is. It honestly is insane. Yeah. He drinks the pill, and she's like, "Haha, you fool! You drank the pill. Maybe wait a little bit longer." But he starts to hiccup, and for some reason they chose to animate the hiccups, like a little cloud of smoke every time he hiccups. Not sure if I like that or not. It's different anyway. The gang have blown up the door. I just wrote gang at this point because there was too many characters and I couldn't be bothered.
Yeah.
The gang with old Bond, they blow up the door. There's a bit of nice sped up footage as they're doing all of this, and things just start blowing up. I mean, I would try and explain stuff, but I can't. There's like big ice cubes at one point, it looks like, or big crystals. Yeah.
I guess the nicest way you can explain this is it's a parody of the base exploding scene, right? Like, this has all been taking place underneath Casino Royale, and a lot of this has been just like, it's the typical Bond base. So that's like, I guess, the generous version of all this. Like, it's just a parody of that, but it doesn't really feel that way when you're watching it. But that's what they're going for.
Especially when Frankenstein shows up.
Oh yeah, Frankenstein. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Frankenstein, as he does, he shows up and shows them the right way to go to get back up to the casino. Very nice of him.
That's it. That's what happens. Like, they're just walking down and they're trying to find the office, which is where the elevator is to get back to the casino. And just Frankenstein walks past, and Bond's like, "Oh, excuse me, fellow, do you know where it is?" And then he just shows them the way, and he's like, "Thank you very much." And then Frankenstein just leaves. That's it.
He's got things to do. Okay, he's a busy man. Or men. Okay, I'm going to leave you for the rest of this.
Okay, cool.
And also,
I guess we should clarify it's Frankenstein's monster for that guy. I know
oh, you're getting blocked, whoever you are. I know who you are.
The gang, as we'll call them, Jinkies, are all together, and I think they do head up with the elevator, like that office they were in before. And I think the first thing that happens is that Vesper is there. Like, Bond is trying to contact for help, and Vesper's like, "I'm a double agent."
Oh no, I don't care.
I just don't really know what that means in the case of anything. But I don't know. She's apparently a double agent. But they have a little bit of fight. I think he wins. And then this turns into an all-out brawl. A big brouhaha. Like, we had that kind of before with at Berlin, but this is an even bigger one. So all it is just all the characters and all these random people are just fighting in the casino. Like, everyone's just kind of fighting. Very silly. Lots of silly things happening all around. You have some people joining in. You have some people just not really doing much. And then you've got really like absurd stuff starts happening. Like, the middle of what would you call that, where you put the ball in and it spins? Is there a nice name for that?
The roulette wheel?
Roulette wheel. Yeah, that starts spinning and floating in, like flying in the air, and starts shooting out. And we then get so Bond has called in reinforcements. And this is also another time when it made me laugh. It was like, "Haha, the Americans have arrived." And it just cuts to Wild West footage of a load of cowboys and horses charging through the desert. And then it just cuts to a load of cowboys and horses storming into the casino to get into the fight. And just, that cut did make me laugh when he said, "The Americans are here." And it just cut to like blatant cowboy footage. I was like, that's kind of funny, actually.
There's another, didn't they do that with a later bit where it's like old-timey policemen as well that are about to...
there's kind of a lot of that. Like, the whole idea is that everything is happening in this casino. So you also have the French come in to help, and like one of the American guys is the CIA guy from before. I think Bond uses some sort of device, old Bond. I can't remember what it was. He like blows into something and it like shoots stuff out. Or maybe he doesn't blow into it. But there's like lots of little things like that. Like, a lot of little things just start happening. and you're just seeing a big fight, and then you're cutting to these like smaller moments, which none of them are particularly funny, but yeah, again, just weirdness happening. So then, yeah, the French are there, the Americans are there. Then we have Native Americans start coming in. So they start storming the casino. Again, it's very much what you would expect, the big old stereotype there. So they're not really there to fight the cowboys, they're just there to have more people into the fight. And don't they come from like helicopters or something?
Yeah, they parachute down.
Yeah, they like airdrop into the casino. And then at one point they like end up like having a fire in the middle of the casino, and like the Native Americans start dancing around it and hollering and things like that. Yeah, again, I can't really describe every single moment of this. It's
no,
just
you
not
have
possible.
to. You must.
I'm gonna have to just watch it again.
Well, I've got in my notes just a few things to add.
Okay, yeah.
Lots of bubbles. There's a bubble machine in this casino. There's also some, of course, you've got to have some apes, because why not?
Oh yeah. What?
Oh, and seals as well. Some clapping seals.
Oh yeah. Just a seal that does, what is it, like 007 or something?
Yeah, it's got a little sign on it. It's like a 007 seal.
Yeah. So I guess that is also James Bond, I guess is the implication.
There's a film I'd watch.
Yeah.
And the last thing I wrote down is that at one point they like break into a room and it's all these women painted gold. So
oh yes, of course. Yeah. That's very quick, isn't it? But yeah, just at the back, there's just a load of people who are gold. So while all this is happening, we have Jimmy Bond, who is having the hiccups, and he is counting down because the pill that he took will eventually blow him up, but it's like a certain number of hiccups that he has to do. So while the madness is happening, it keeps cutting to Jimmy Bond just hiccuping, and you hear the numbers go down and down. And then eventually you cut to him, and I think you hear he goes like 3, 2, and then the casino just blows up. Like it explodes, it completely gets destroyed, and you cut to like the heavens, I guess, or clouds, and that guy who was singing before, like the weird little song, then starts singing about how there's like 5 James Bonds, or there's like 6 James Bonds, and 5 are going to heaven, but one of them are going to hell, and you see Jimmy Bond going down to hell, and then credits, and we're done.
Oh, thank God.
That's it.
Oh, hallelujah. We made it.
I guess it's like, it's hard to feel one way or the other about this ending from my point of view, where it's like, I didn't really hate the ending. By this point, I just feel pretty battle hardened with this film. Like, this isn't as weird as the UFO, really. Well, maybe it is, but like, I was just kind of like not fussed by, oh, they have this weird, crazy ending. Yeah, I guess that kind of makes sense. I guess it's just more surprising how quickly it just happens. That you just get to this big, crazy fight, and then everyone blows up and dies. A little silly song, credits. Like, that felt very strange. But again, I was just kind of happy it was, we were done.
The speed of it almost felt like a joke in itself.
Yeah.
Like, I almost expected Finn to appear on the screen, you know, like when the end of a film it just says Finn really quickly. I agree with you. The ending didn't annoy me because I think I'd already been sort of broken by that point in the film I said where it seemed to switch with the UFO. And I think that's where I'm actually quite sad now, having talked about this with you, because I think, as we've said, describing some of the gags in this film actually sound quite funny and make us laugh. And I do think that if the first half or 2/3 of this film, I mean, let me be clear, it's not good, right? It's not good. But it definitely had potential. And before it went completely doolally at the end, I liked the premise they had going with multiple bonds. And if they kept with that kind of absurd, but not totally absurd humour, I actually think it could have worked as a good spoof film. Unfortunately, that's not what we got. So, we ended up with that mess at the end, which might have been what some people found funnier. I guess it's taste as well, right? That's the difficult thing with comedy films, is more so than just regular action films, is like, this is going to be very hit or miss for people. Some people might find just seeing Hitler really funny. I don't know. Maybe. So yeah, I feel really kind of conflicted about this film, to be honest.
Yeah. So I don't have much else to add with the ending. So yeah, just to kind of overall thoughts on the film, I kind of agree. Like, it should not be 2 hours. It just shouldn't be 2 hours. And even just with basic editing, if you got it down to an hour and a half, which you could very easily do, you would just have a more concise film that would just be easier to enjoy. Like, it would just be easier to enjoy the jokes that do kind of work. And if you cut out some of the absurdity and dial it down just a bit, then yeah, I'm kind of with you. You can kind of see this kind of working. It's just such a mess. Like, it is just the definition of a complete mess. And it's so messy that I guess their solution was to make it even more messier and over the top, which
Yeah.
again just makes it even worse. But if it was just a bit more focused, if it just removes some of the plot points, get rid of Cooper for Christ's sake, like get rid of the Scotland stuff. I mean, get rid of Woody Allen actually is probably the
Yeah.
first thing I would do, and just kind of focus this all up. It just would have been something decent. I don't think it's something I really wanted. Like, even a version of that is not something I would really want. Like them doing a Bond parody so soon, especially because it is actually called Casino Royale and it actually does have James Bond in it. Like, I think maybe I don't think I actually want that. I like Austin Powers more because it's not actually the thing, it's a parody of the thing. So there is kind of a little bit of confusion there with actually being James Bond and being the parody of James Bond, even though it is actually James Bond. So I don't think I ever would have got on board with that, but I could definitely see a more focused version of this film being just like a decent, okay 60s comedy.
Yeah. I guess we have to be thankful that this happened and then that was it.
Yeah.
They did, I guess it couldn't really have happened anymore because of the rights and stuff. Like, this was a bit of a maybe, they could have done Never Say Never Again, but they didn't. They chose to do it a bit more straight faced. So this was it. They were one and done with the spoof stuff. And then we had Austin Powers 30 years later, which is fine.
It's just like, yeah. And again, that's what the way I think you have to do it. But yeah, just as a film by itself, again, you have to push the Bond part aside to a certain extent. But just as a film by itself, just poorly paced, not really very funny, really incoherent with its plot, and just actually quite unpleasant to watch. Really boring, which I guess is the biggest crime of this sort of film. So any potential that it does have is kind of lost because I just don't think it's very well made, even from that side of things. Even if you found some of this stuff more funny than we did, I still just don't think it's a very well made film. It's just too confusing for that.
I would recommend. I mean, we've been speaking for longer than the film lasts, pretty much. So don't go and watch the film. Like, I'd say if you are curious about it, if you're a Bond fan, because it is a bit of Bond history, so I think on that note alone, it has some kind of merit to it. Just purely based on the fact it is linked to the Bond franchise in this weird little oddity. But you don't have to watch it though. I think it's a very interesting thing to read up on about how it came to be, maybe, if you find that interesting about like the rights and production and the mess that production could have been. And look out for Tom's TikTok because there are there are funny moments in here, but you shouldn't have to go through 2 hours and 11 minutes of it to find them. So, yeah, do that. You heard it here.
Yeah, I agree with that. As like, I guess I'm glad we did do this and watch the film. It's nice to do that and tick it off. But as we started this podcast talking about, there's a reason it's forgotten because it's just long, it's just boring, it just doesn't really mean that much in the grand scheme of things. And I don't think I'll ever watch it again. I can't think of any reason why I would ever watch this film ever. Like, even if there was something I wanted to rewatch, I would rather watch the individual clips and just remember my experience than ever watch this again. It's just too long and boring.
Yeah.
So, Joe, where would you rank? Where is it going in the old rankings, Joe?
I actually forgot. Did we rank Never Say Never Again?
We did, yeah.
Oh, God, I can't even remember where I put that.
You ranked it last. Dead last.
Oh, well, thank you for remembering for me. This is worse than Never Say Never Again. I don't think that's a very shocking statement to make.
Controversial, yeah.
So it is going at the bottom. I think you're right. I probably said that I never want to watch it again back when I watched it a few years ago. But this time I mean it. All right. This time for realsies. I never want to watch this film again.
Yeah. So I didn't put Never Say Never Again last. I think I still liked it more than Octopussy. So it went like above Diamonds Are Forever, and it went above Octopussy. But this one feels like one you kind of can't put on the list, but I guess because we have to, it's last. It's definitely underneath Diamonds Are Forever. I would definitely rather watch that film than this film. Again, it feels a bit wrong even ranking it in any sense, but yeah, it's not really a Bond film, and for all the reasons I detailed, it's just never something I want to watch. And I guess it's an interesting trivia question, and that's it, really. From our point of view, we did say before, if you're a fan of all these people, you probably should watch this, and someone could get a lot of appreciation out of this. But as someone who can't kind of do that, it's just a badly made, unfunny comedy.
Amen.
Yes. So do you have any last thoughts before we go, Joe?
I think after listening to that ending again, and just the whole thing, basically, just the whole film, it really makes you grateful for the main Bond franchise, doesn't it?
Oh dear.
May have said something similar when we watched Never Say Never Again. For like, this is, I know they're meant to be different things, right? One's obviously a spoof, but it just makes you realize what you have, right? And now more than ever, I just want to go and watch a nice, normal, good Bond film. You know?
I know, yeah, because I haven't watched any Bond films in between these. So yeah, the last two, I guess you're in the same boat. Last two was Casino Royale 1967 and Never Say Never Again. And it's like, yeah, they're just leagues apart in terms of just even watching something that feels a bit, that is clearly quite flawed, like, I don't know, Die Another Day or The World Is Not Enough. Even that is still more enjoyable. Like, when I got annoyed with a film like The World Is Not Enough, it's because I saw the potential and I really like Bond, and you can kind of see it there. I'm more like frustrated at its lack of delivering on what it could be rather than it just being an awful film. But then you watch something like Casino Royale and you're like, oh, that's just an awful film. So I'm like less annoyed about it, but it's like I'm less annoyed because I don't care as much, where I do care as much with the actual Bond film, because there is a lot to really enjoy.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm going to go. You know what? I'm going to go watch For Your Eyes Only.
Oh, well, don't do that.
I am. I need to go see BB.
Wow. I don't know what I'm going to go watch then. What's the film that you liked the least that I actually liked?
Live and Let Die? How was that on yours? Go watch Live and
that
Let
was
Die.
quite high, wasn't it? And I think No Time to Die I liked a lot more than you. Thunderball, that's what I'll watch.
Ah, yes.
I'll give Thunderball a good watch. Enjoy some underwater scenes. I'm up for that.
Sounds good.
Okay, so that was Casino Royale. Thank you very much for listening. You have been listening to a bonus episode of the Bond Revisited podcast. Maybe we'll be back. Maybe not. I think after this, maybe let's not. But I'm sure this is such a low point that I guess we have to come back at some point to beat it.
We really should. Yeah.
I'm sure you wouldn't have heard the last of us talking about James Bond.
We'll be here till our dying breath. That's got morbid. Okay, never mind.
Well, there's no time to die, obviously.
There
it is.